Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Tara Baker. Tara Baker was born on January 20th, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother later remarried. She is the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, she showed a strong interest in the legal system, with the desire to pursue a career as a lawyer or judge. She would often engage in mock trials with her stuffed animals, create contracts with her relatives, and even write letters to politicians, including the President of the United States, to express her opinions. After high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating in 1999. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia, one of the top law schools in the country, located in Athens, a small town close to her parents' home. To avoid dorm life, Tara rented a house with 2 other university students, one of whom she knew from college. Tara worked at a prestigious law firm in downtown Athens, covering her expenses and gaining valuable experience in her future profession. In January 2001, Tara spent a lot of time studying at the university library. On the evening of January 18th, she went to the library to study with a friend. Her friend left the library around 7:30 p.m. Tara stayed behind, calling her friend at 9:46 p.m. to check if she had arrived home safely, mentioning that she would head home soon. The next day, around 6 p.m., Tara's mother, Virginia Baker, received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as a detective. The detective tells Virginia that they need her daughter Tara's fingerprints for their current investigation. Believing it was a prank, Virginia hung up, but her curiosity got the better of her. She decided to call the Athens police station to verify the call. Police said the caller was actually a forensic detective, and they further informed her that there had been a fire at Tara's home. The detective explained that they were trying to locate Tara, but so far, they had only found one of Tara's roommates, who had been out at the time of the fire. The other roommate was also missing, and investigators suspected that the unidentified body they found might be one of them. Virginia was desperate for information and asked the detective to describe the room where the body was found. The detective's response sent a chill down Tara's spine. The room was filled with Tara antique items, which she had spent years collecting. Virginia and her family immediately drove to Athens to see what was happening to their daughter, hoping that it was just a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arriving at the police station, they were forced to wait for several hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective emerged and delivered the devastating news. The body found in the house was indeed Tara's, and her death was a result of murder, not the fire. However, the detective was exhausted and declined to answer any questions. Before departing, he shared one crucial detail: Tara had inadvertently left behind a clue. Fragments of the perpetrator's skin were found under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's family was shocked, confused, and hopeless by the news. Despite their requests for more information about Tara, the police remained silent, not providing any further details. The family of Tara Baker was left in the dark about her murder investigation. Despite their repeated attempts to get information from detectives, they were met with silence. The local police department never reached out to them, forcing the family to constantly call and visit the station to beg for updates. Through persistence, they were able to gather some details about the case. Firefighters were called to Tara's address on January 19th at approximately 11 a.m. in response to a fire. After extinguishing the flames, they found Tara's body inside. The medical examiner's report confirmed that she had been murdered, with signs of strangulation and stab wounds. It appeared that the killer had set the fire to destroy evidence after Tara's death. However, the police refused to share the medical examiner's report with Tara's parents, leaving them without crucial information about her murder. The family also discovered that some evidence may have been destroyed by the firefighters. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon in cases like this. Investigators may not have properly secured the crime scene, which could have resulted in the loss of evidence. As Tara's family sought answers about her death, they were met with a lack of transparency and disrespect from the police. They were not kept informed about the investigation, were often treated rudely and unprofessionally. In an attempt to hold the police accountable, they began to record their conversations and filed complaints, but these efforts yielded no results. The family sought the advice of a renowned criminologist. However, the local police department would only allow him to review the case materials under one condition: he was not to share any information or findings with Tara's relatives. This left Tara's family unable to find answers about her death. Tara's family waited 10 years to get her death certificate. After writing to the state governor, they finally received it, but it didn't give them the answers they were looking for. Instead of explaining what caused her death, the certificate simply stated that she died from multiple injuries, without providing any further details. Despite the police continued their investigation, but their actions raised several questions. When Tara's body was discovered, firefighters immediately called the police, recognizing that a murder had taken place. But the crime scene was seriously destroyed due to extensive damage from the fire and water used to extinguish it. Furthermore, the family later discovered that some surviving items at the crime scene were not examined for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was found missing from her room, but other valuables were intact. Since there was no evidence of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara was familiar with her killer and had voluntarily allowed them into her room. Although the crime scene was heavily damaged due to the fire, investigators established that Tara's 2 roommates were away from town at the time, leaving Tara home alone. Because it was difficult to determine the exact time of death, medical experts narrowed the window down to a time frame of 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, to 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. The likelihood of the crime occurring during the early morning hours, given the speed at which the fire spread. The police investigation uncovered 2 significant leads. One involved a witness who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder, wearing only a t-shirt and jeans despite the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered a suspicious phone call made to Tara's university a few days before her death. A heavily intoxicated man had called the university's student information line. The man managed to correctly provide Tara Baker's name and request her phone number. Although the phone call was highly suspicious, the police were unable to identify the caller. Meanwhile, Tara's boyfriend became an immediate person of interest in the investigation. He provided an alibi, which was verified by the police, but they continued to view him with suspicion. Police have repeatedly questioned him and asked him to provide additional biological samples, answer additional questions, or undergo a lie detector test. Tara's boyfriend was asked to identify her body after the fire. He had traveled from another city to Athens as soon as he heard the news. Although Tara's parents were already in town, the police requested that the boyfriend make the identification. However, he was not allowed to enter the house. Instead, a police officer took a photograph of the body and showed it to him on a camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and unsure if the body was Tara's. To confirm, he asked to see a pair of earrings he had given her. The officer retrieved the earrings from the body Tara's and showed them to him. After seeing the earrings, the boyfriend confirmed that the body was indeed Tara's. The police then shifted their focus to a male student who had a reputation for being troublesome. Several female students reported that he had repeatedly asked them out on dates, despite being told no, and made them feel uncomfortable with his behavior. The student had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Detectives investigated the student but found no evidence linking him to the crime. They even asked Tara's friends to monitor the boy's activities, but this did not bring any new progress. detectives began to focus on another suspect, a guy who was Tara's co-worker. When they interviewed his co-workers, they discovered that his behavior in the days leading up to the murders was very strange. Specifically, he had stopped socializing with a group of close co-workers. Additionally, just days before the murders, he had told Tara that he would not be able to attend her birthday party, which was scheduled for the day after the murders. On the morning of January 19th, one of Tara's co-workers tried to convince him to attend birthday celebration, as Tara had been hurt by his initial refusal. When the colleague visited the attorney's office, however, he was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as the attorney was typically present at the office in the mornings. A check of his work schedule revealed no meetings or appointments, adding to the mystery of his absence. His behavior raised suspicions after Tara's murder. He was absent on the day of the murder, but the next day, he visited a colleague's home and acted strangely. Many suspect that he regularly used illegal drugs, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. The co-worker noticed several fresh scratches on his neck, which were notable because several pieces of skin were found under Tara's fingernails, suggesting that she may have scratched her attacker in self-defense. When questioned about the scratches, he claimed he got them from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. However, when asked about his suspicions regarding the killer, his response was unusual. He screams that Tara's father is the culprit, but he cannot produce any evidence to back up his accusation. Furthermore, he resigned from his position just a few months after the murder and left the state. It is unclear whether the police compared his DNA with the samples found under Tara's nails. But they have not shared any information about this aspect of the investigation, even with Tara's relatives. The police discovered that he was married, but still secretly dated two female colleagues. This revelation could explain his unusual behavior and unexplained absences from work. Both women also suspected that he was using illicit substances. However, police found no evidence to prove his involvement in the murder and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The detectives also investigated the maintenance company employees who had access to the house where Tara lived. They had a spare key, which might explain why there was no sign of forced entry. Unfortunately, this lead also yielded no results. Since then, the case has had no new clues. The police continue to search for new suspects and witnesses, but they are keeping many details about their investigation under wraps to avoid it being undermined. The investigation into Tara's murder continued over the years, with several new leads emerging, but it did not yield any results for the investigation. One witness reported seeing an African-American man near Tara's house on the day of the fire, while another claimed to have seen blood on a classmate's notebook shortly after the murder. Despite police efforts to pursue these leads, they ultimately led to dead ends. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward in hopes of generating new leads. The detective team working on the case changed several times, but they all encountered considerable difficulties due to lack of evidence. The fire in Tara's room burned most of the evidence, leaving the police with few clues to investigate. 19 years after Tara's murder, a podcast about her case was released, generating renewed interest and attention. The podcast gathered information from Tara's family and individuals connected to the case, re-examining the evidence and helped reinvestigate the case. The police department took notice of the podcast, leading to better cooperation between detectives and Tara's family. For several months, detectives reviewed all available information and evidence, using modern DNA analysis tools to re-examine the evidence. Their efforts paid off on May 13, 2024, when police announced that they had finally arrested the perpetrator, 23 years after the murder. The suspect, Edric Lamont Faust, 48, was arrested, but police did not reveal how they identified the suspect, citing the need to keep some information secret to protect ongoing legal proceedings. Investigators only mentioned that modern DNA analysis tools and other biological evidence played a crucial role in Edric's identification. Further details of the case were not disclosed at the press conference, and police chose to withhold evidence to avoid compromising Edric's trial. However, his arrest documents revealed that he was accused of assaulting Tara. Additionally, a piece of skin was found under Tara's fingernails, which was used to extract the killer's DNA using modern DNA analysis tools. The police had likely known about Edric for years due to his long history of crime, which included multiple arrests. At the time of Tara's murder, he was 25 and lived in the same city as she. Despite this, the police initially found no evidence suggesting that Edric knew Tara. It wasn't until recently, thanks to advanced DNA analysis, that Edric became a suspect in the case. Detectives only started investigating him a few days before his arrest. Edric is currently in jail awaiting trial. The police are confident that they have found the right person, as they obtained irrefutable DNA evidence. As a result, Edric was denied bail, and Tara's case is now considered closed. Tara's family finally finds out the truth after 23 years. Thanks to a new team of detectives who reopen the case and solve it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her co-workers grew worried and attempted to contact her. But her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Rafael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Rafael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for her shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Rafael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Rafael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development: Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, The remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alejandra Lafuente. Alejandra Lafuente was a stunning brunette with captivating hair and bright brown eyes that accentuated her thick, dark eyelashes. She maintained her athletic physique through a dedicated fitness routine, which included yoga and breathing exercises. Taking care of herself was a top priority for Alejandra, and she frequently visited beauty salons, massage parlors, and spas to pamper herself. During warm weather, she could often be found lounging on the beach while still managing to get some scientific work done. On cloudy days, she would opt for tanning salons instead. It's clear that Alejandra had a deep affection for herself and believed she embodied the ideal of female attractiveness. Her career was also thriving, thanks in part to her father's influence. Alberto Dente, a renowned psychiatrist and doctor of sciences, was a leading expert in his field, with a focus on mental health conditions such as schizophrenia and manic disorders. His groundbreaking scientific work and experiments had earned him widespread recognition. Alejandra greatly admired her father and aspired to achieve similar success. She followed in his footsteps by enrolling in a prestigious university to study psychiatry, where she graduated with honors. Her strong work ethic, exceptional intelligence, and her father's influential connections enabled her to complete and defend her thesis on manic syndrome with distinction. However, Alejandra's career took an unexpected turn when she became more interested in working as a psychotherapist rather than pursuing a traditional path in psychiatry. With the financial support of her father, Alejandra obtained the necessary licensing and opened her own practice in a modern business center located in the heart of the capital. Her practice quickly gained popularity, attracting a diverse range of female clients who sought counseling for issues such as eating disorders, depression, relationship problems, and low self-esteem. Alejandra demonstrated a remarkable ability to help her clients resolve complex family issues. Despite her professional success, her personal life faced challenges. Her first marriage ultimately ended in divorce, but it was blessed with two beautiful daughters who inherited Alejandra's captivating eyes and her father's sharp sense of humor. Alejandra wasn't discouraged despite having two children. She still wanted to meet someone who could be a good partner and father to her daughters. After her separation, her ex-husband would visit on weekends to spend time with she and help with household chores. However, his last visit would be his final one. Alejandra asked him to enter through the backyard, claiming the front door lock was jammed. She then directed him to the bathroom, saying their youngest daughter was bathing. Unaware of the danger, he complied. The house was eerily silent, with no cartoons or children's laughter. Upon entering the bathroom, he noticed tape on the floor and an empty bathtub. At that moment, he realized something was wrong. Alejandra stood behind him, wielding a hammer. She delivered two forceful blows to his head, causing him to collapse with blood pouring from his skull. The experts later determined that the first blow was fatal, and he had no chance of saving himself. The eldest daughter returned home early from a friend's house and became an unintentional witness to a horrific scene. The children had often seen their parents arguing, and Alejandra, who was believed to have mental health issues, would frequently lash out at her friends and even physically attack her husband. Her friends and housemates had observed her outbursts and erratic behavior on multiple occasions. On this particular day, the situation escalated out of control. The daughter fled the house and called for help, prompting a neighbor to rush over and contact the police. Alejandra, a psychologist, was arrested and charged with murder. She spent a month in a cell awaiting her initial court hearing. During the trial, Alejandra maintained her innocence. Her lawyers argued that she had acted in self-defense, claiming that her ex-husband was excessively jealous and had fabricated stories about her bringing men into the house, which could harm the mental well-being of their daughters. According to their version of events, on the day of the crime, the ex-husband had shown up unexpectedly at Alejandra's house, entering through the back door in an attempt to catch her with another man. He then allegedly attacked Alejandra, who was in the bathroom trying to assemble a nightstand. She was forced to defend herself and delivered 2 blows to the back of her ex-husband's head. On June 14, 2012, the court delivered its verdict. Considering the evidence presented by her defense team and the fact that she had 2 young children, Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months in prison. However, thanks to the efforts of her lawyers and her father's financial support, her prison term was commuted to a suspended sentence. A few months later, her team filed an appeal, requesting that the charges be dropped. The basis of the appeal was that Alejandra had acted in self-defense. Human rights activists rallied around her, calling for a jury trial and portraying her as a victim of domestic violence. The court reviewed her case and ultimately handed down an acquittal. After her release, Alejandra resumed her work as a psychological counselor. She cultivated an image as a victim of gender inequality who had fought for her rights and won. This newfound image boosted Alejandra's popularity among potential clients. She soon met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a wealthy Mexican businessman and the son of Adrian Carrera Francis. Alan was tall, handsome, and impressive. His father had previously headed the Special Services Department for the Central District and had achieved significant success in his career. Soon Alan expanded his business, creating a chain of construction stores that opened across the country. However, while part of his business was legitimate, another part was secretly linked to crime. This connection led to his father's removal from his position after one of Alan's financial frauds was exposed. Furthermore, Alan had a stake in a criminal group that transported psychotropic substances to the United States. Their base, located in a border town, was guarded by corrupt police officers and controlled a small portion of the psychoactive substance trade in the South. Alan's father was found to be involved in his son's activities, and after providing a statement to the police, he faced a 20-year prison sentence. Nevertheless, Adrian Carrera was released early on July 18, 2000, as part of the Witness Protection Program. Upon release, he dedicated himself to his son and legitimate business ventures. His son, Alan Carrera, quickly adopted his father's views and experiences. After graduating from college, Alan followed in his father's footsteps and became an entrepreneur, showing particular interest in a household appliance store that he successfully managed despite his young age. This business was smaller than his father's but generated a decent income. Alan was always surrounded by women, yet he had been in love with a classmate since childhood, whom he eventually married. She was intelligent, attractive, and came from a good family. The marriage, though brief, was vibrant and resulted in a beautiful daughter. However, Alan's frequent absence from home due to work led to the breakdown of their marriage, ultimately ending in divorce. Alan struggled to move on from his high school sweetheart. He found no joy in new books and was immersed himself by loneliness and sadness, which led him to develop a drinking problem. To overcome his prolonged depression and alcohol addiction, Alan tried various methods, including books, AA meetings, and therapy. Eventually, he met with Dr. Alberto, a renowned psychiatrist. Meanwhile, Alan's ex-wife, Maria, was also dealing with the aftermath of their difficult divorce. Her father was going through a similar experience. Despite their separation, Maria couldn't shake off her loneliness and still considered Alan the only man in her life. She decided to seek professional help and visited a therapist. However, the psychiatrist who had been helping Alan recover explained that due to ethical reasons, he couldn't counsel both spouses. He recommended that Maria seek guidance from a different therapist, Alejandra. However, it's notable that Alejandra's relationship with Maria wasn't transparent, as she didn't disclose that her father was involved. Alejandra soon realized Alan could be a suitable match. Alan was described as a pleasant and wealthy man in his prime. Without hesitation, Alejandra asked Maria to bring Alan in for another session. According to Alejandra, she could resolve their issues in a single session. During the session, Alejandra and her father put their plan to seduce the Alan into action. It didn't take long to get results. Immediately after the session, Alan asked Alejandra out for coffee to discuss family issues. Initially, she declined, citing medical ethics, but they went on a date that same evening. A romantic affair quickly developed between them. However, Maria soon discovered their relationship and was shocked. She considered reporting Alejandra to the Medical Ethics Committee but decided against it. As a skilled therapist, Alejandra convinced Maria to let the situation go, attributing Maria's concerns to jealousy and an unwillingness to move on from her ex-husband. According to Alejandra, holding on to these feelings would prevent a happy future. Maria chose not to attend therapy sessions with Alan after they ended. Around the same time, Alan's relationship with Alejandra progressed quickly. Within a few months of meeting, they moved in together. 2 months later, they decided to get married, but Alan was unaware of Alejandra's past issues and the reasons for her previous divorce. In April 2014, Alan visited his parents and took the opportunity to discuss his upcoming wedding. His parents were surprised to learn about the wedding and his partner, Alejandra, as they had never heard of her before. The marriage was registered a week after Alan met with his parents. Notably, Alejandra asked Alan not to invite her friends and family to the wedding, citing a modest budget as the reason. However, her father did attend the ceremony. At first, their life seemed like a dream come true. They were young, happy, and had many plans and aspirations. However, this didn't last long. Alejandra's volatile temperament soon became apparent. The relationship between them began to deteriorate rapidly. Alan was a private person who kept his personal life to himself, even from friends. As a result, few people knew what was happening behind closed doors. However, it was clear that the relationship was strained, and they no longer appeared happy. After marrying Alejandra, Alan distanced himself from his family. When his parents weren't invited to the wedding, leading to a complete breakdown in communication. Alan's friends noticed that his wife was becoming increasingly anxious and short-tempered, often behaving inappropriately. After a few embarrassing incidents, Alan became ashamed and started to limit their social interactions. Their arguments became a daily occurrence, often with no apparent reason or justification. Alejandra discovered her husband Alan's infidelity by snooping through his phone one evening. The racy messages from other women were the final straw. She claimed that when she confronted him about his cheating, he became violent, insulting, and humiliating. Feeling that the marriage was beyond repair, Alejandra decided to take drastic action. Instead of seeking therapy or counseling, she turned to a more sinister solution. Her focus shifted to devising the perfect plan to murder Alan. Alan, oblivious to his wife's intentions, continued his daily routine. He remained distant from his family, only making an effort to attend the annual family gathering to celebrate his grandfather's birthday. Alan attended the feast, but his parents made it clear that his wife, Alejandra, was not a welcome guest in their home. This snub infuriated Alejandra and further strained the relationship. Little did they know, this would be the last time the family saw Alan alive. On October 31, 2014, Alan sent a text message to his family, saying he had arrived home safely after his birthday party. However, he hasn't been in touch since then, and his absence from work for several days was unusual, as he was always responsible and diligent about his job. With the launch of a new business venture approaching, Alan's presence was crucial. But Alejandra had a sinister plan, which she set in motion after Alan returned from his birthday celebration. The couple had another argument, and Alejandra decided to eliminate her husband. Alejandra spiked his milk with a powerful sleeping pill, which Alan typically drank before bed, and then smothered him with a pillow. Alejandra took pleasure in watching her husband struggle to regain consciousness, pathetically trying to remove the pillow and take a breath. The most challenging part, however, was disposing of the body, a task she hadn't had time to plan for. Alejandra was in a desperate situation, as her husband Alan was too heavy for her to move on her own. With time running out, she rushed to her neighbor's vegetable garden to borrow an electric saw. She used the saw to cut Alan's body into pieces. This behavior seemed like something only a true sadist could accomplish. After dismembering the body, Alejandra packed the parts into garbage bags, taking the precaution of cutting off fingers and pulling teeth to hinder identification if the body was discovered. She stuffed the bags into suitcases to make it easier to remove the remains from the house without arousing suspicion. However, her plan was foiled as dawn approached. Alejandra struggled to leave the house with the heavy suitcases unnoticed. An elderly neighbor, who was awake due to insomnia, watched from her window and grew concerned about Alejandra's early and suspicious departure. It seemed strange that her husband wasn't helping her with the heavy luggage, and Alejandra's constant glancing around only added to the neighbor's unease. At dawn, Alejandra returned home, surprising her vigilant neighbor even more than before. It was later discovered that she had dispersed bags containing her ex-husband's remains across different neighborhoods to conceal her actions. As a new day began, she resumed her daily routine. On November 6, 2014, Mexican police made a gruesome discovery, a human torso with no teeth and no fingers. The entire police force was alerted due to the extreme brutality of the incident. Within a day, additional body parts were found in various locations throughout the city. Notably, the distance between the locations where the body parts were found was substantial. This would later be linked to Alejandra's prolonged absence from home. All the discovered body parts were sent to a leading forensic laboratory, where experts promptly confirmed that they belonged to the same individual. To avoid raising suspicions, Alejandra sent messages to Alan's relatives, claiming they were going on vacation and would be unreachable. Unbeknownst to her, Alan had recently distanced himself from his family and wasn't in contact with them. However, Alejandra's plan was foiled when her father, Alberto, called Alan's father's house to inquire about Alejandra's whereabouts. Alberto was concerned because he hadn't heard from her in a while, and her patients were worried about missing their counseling sessions. Later, Alberto called Alan's relatives again, informing them that Alejandra had been found and forcibly admitted to a clinic due to depression caused by her husband's infidelity. This alarming news prompted Alan's relatives to try and locate him, but they were unsuccessful. As a result, Alan's family sought police assistance. Forensic experts compared the remains of a recently discovered corpse with Alan's characteristics and confirmed a 100% match. Alan's relatives also identified the body, which was especially distressing for his grandfather. Shortly after the identification, his grandfather fell ill with heart disease and lost. The investigation led to a search warrant for Alan's home and office, where a patch of freshly dug earth was found in the backyard. Upon further digging, fingers and teeth were discovered. Alejandra was immediately apprehended, and traces of blood were found in one of the rooms, on the car trunk, and in the garage. Initially, Alejandra denied her guilt, hoping to escape punishment as she had with her previous husband's case. However, the investigation quickly resolved the case, aided by the testimony of an elderly witness whose account matched Alan's estimated time of death. Alejandra had used her position to obtain a powerful sleeping pill, a medication only accessible to doctors. This new evidence further implicated her in the case, establishing a link between Alejandra and the brutal murder of her husband. CCTV cameras played a crucial role in tracing Alan's movements, confirming that he entered the house but never left. The footage also showed that suitcases were removed from the house. On December 10, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict, sentencing Alejandra to life imprisonment for murder with brutality, attempted concealment of the crime, and abuse of her official position. Despite her father's efforts to use his connections and bribes to spare Alejandra from imprisonment, he was ultimately unsuccessful. However, he did manage to have the trial closed to the public and press, thereby minimizing further publicity. However, his actions were ultimately driven by self-interest and a desire to advance his career. As a result, his reputation as a specialist has been severely damaged, and it is unlikely that anyone will seek his expertise again. This is largely due to his failure to recognize the problems with his own daughter and the fact that he raised her to be a ruthless and calculating individual. The trial also brought to light the case of Alejandra's first husband, whose death had occurred under suspicious circumstances. Although the passage of time had made it difficult to gather evidence, there were suspicions that Alejandra's father may have been involved in the incident. Some even speculated that he had colluded with his daughter and that their actions had been motivated by a twisted scientific interest. Despite these suspicions, no concrete evidence was found to support this theory. Following numerous appeals from the victims' families, the sentence was ultimately increased to death. This was a highly unusual outcome, as such sentenced are extremely rare in Mexico, particularly in modern times. Alejandra has been denied the opportunity to appeal the case, and her property, including their house, will be transferred to Alan's family. However, this offers little comfort, as the loss of a loved one can never be fully compensated. It has become clear that Alejandra was a pragmatic and cruel individual with significant mental health issues, despite medical examinations initially suggesting that she was sane. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rachel O'Reilly. Rachel O'Reilly was born in 1974 in the northern outskirts of County Dublin, Ireland. She was adopted by Rose and Jim Calley at a young age, as her biological parents were not known to her. The Calley, unable to have children of their own, devoted their love to their 5 adopted children, including Rachel. Growing up, Rachel was a diligent and ambitious individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, assisted her parents with household chores, and avoided causing any trouble. As a result, she developed into a sociable, open, and exceptionally kind person who easily connected with others and steered clear of conflicts. During her teenage years, Rachel developed a passion for softball, regularly competing in tournaments and setting multiple local records. She also formed a strong bond with her adoptive mother, confiding in her and maintaining a close relationship even after she got married and started a family of her own. After graduating from high school, Rachel attended a local university to study marketing. At the same time, she worked in sales at a department store in the city, where she met Joe O'Reilly. Joe O'Reilly was born in 1972 in County Dublin to a humble family. He was the second child and had an older sister. His parents instilled in their children the value of hard work and independence. As a young man, Joe was tall, athletic, and enjoyed softball. After completing high school, he studied advertising through correspondence and worked as a manager in a department store. It was at this department store that he met Rachel, who started working there a few months after Joe. At the time of their meeting, Joe was 19 and Rachel was 17. Joe was immediately drawn to Rachel, taking the initiative to introduce himself to Rachel. Her petite stature and bright smile captivated him. Joe was interested in taking Rachel on a date, but she refused for reasons unknown. Despite this, Joe continued to try to win her over by giving her compliments and surprising her with small gifts like flowers and chocolates at work. However, Rachel remained unresponsive to his efforts. Joe read Rachel's favorite book to find a common conversation topic, but things only improved when Joe discovered Rachel's passion for softball. He joined her at the stadium, walked onto the field during practice, and participated in the game. With his experience and skills in softball, Joe led the team to victory, finally impressing Rachel and having a date. Their relationship progressed quickly. He surprised Rachel with a trip to Paris, where he proposed on the Eiffel Tower. Rachel couldn't resist and agreed to marry him, thinking she had found a fairy tale prince. Years later, they married and had 2 sons. They moved to the Scottish province of Null, purchasing a cozy home perfect for raising their children. After the birth of their eldest son, Rachel left her job to care for her husband and child. 2 years later, they had a second son. At work, Joe demonstrated his capabilities as a reliable, skilled, and diligent specialist. He was always punctual, arriving first and leaving last when necessary. Joe also prioritized fitness, often visiting the gym before work, and even had exercise equipment at home. As their children grew older and started attending kindergarten, Joe's wife Rachel sought to supplement their income. She became a distributor for a well-known cosmetics company and sold household items. This new role allowed her to interact more with their neighbors, who appreciated her kindness and openness. However, as time passed, Joe's presence at home became increasingly scarce. He would only return to sleep, shower, and change clothes, attributing his absence to his demanding job and anticipated promotion. Despite his wife's support, they began to drift apart, and their family relationship declined significantly. In the summer of 2004, a disturbing incident occurred. An anonymous individual sent a letter to Child Protective Services, falsely accusing Rachel of being a bad mother and mistreating her 4- and 2-year-old sons. As a result, a special commission visited the family's home to investigate the allegations. Despite finding no evidence of wrongdoing and receiving positive testimonials from relatives and neighbors about Rachel's parenting, the letter tarnished her reputation. On Monday, October 4, 2004, Rachel's day began normally. Her husband, Joe, left for work at dawn while she and their sons were still asleep. Throughout the day, Joe attempted to contact Rachel several times via text and phone calls, but she didn't respond. He then called their home phone, leaving a worried message on the answering machine, asking Rachel to call him back as soon as possible. In the afternoon, Joe received the concerning call from the kindergarten teacher, informing him that Rachel had failed to pick up the children, which was unprecedented. Joe called his mother-in-law to ask if she knew where Rachel was. When she said she didn't know, Joe asked her to go to their home to check on things. At the same time, Joe went to pick up the kids from kindergarten. When Rose arrived at her daughter's house, she saw Rachel's car in the yard, so she knew Rachel was home. However, the house was dark and quiet, and Rachel didn't answer when Rose called out to her. The first thing Rose noticed was the chaotic state of the house, with cabinets and drawers wide open and their contents scattered all over the floor, resembling a robbery scene. However, Rachel was nowhere to be found. As Rose's mother entered the bedroom, she was met with a horrifying sight. Rachel lay on the floor in a massive pool of her own blood, which was splattered everywhere, on the walls, furniture, and even the ceiling. Rachel's hair was bloody and matted, with her skull visible in some areas. Rose rushed to her daughter, hoping against hope that she might still be alive. But upon touching Rachel's arm, she realized it was cold and stiff, indicating that Rachel had been dead for several hours and that there was no possibility of saving her. Overwhelmed by grief, Rose started screaming and calling out for help before dashing to the phone to dial the police. Her cries for help attracted the attention of the neighbors, including a doctor, who hastened to the scene. He was the first to examine Rachel's body, confirming that she was beyond help. By the time Joe arrived, a crowd had gathered outside the house. Upon learning of his spouse's death, Joe was consumed by anguish, screaming in disbelief as he rushed inside. In the bedroom, beside his wife's lifeless body, Rachel became unhinged. He cried, screamed, and vowed to avenge his wife's brutal murder. The police officers who arrived at the scene described it as the most horrific attack on a defenseless woman they had ever encountered. The murder weapon was likely a heavy, blunt object used with extreme force to inflict severe injuries on Rachel. The attack was so vicious that Rachel's body showed no signs of attempting to defend herself, suggesting she was caught off guard from behind. While the crime scene resembled a robbery, investigators suspected a personal motive or intense hatred due to the brutality of the attack. However, it was unclear who could harbor such animosity towards a young, petite mother of two. The investigation began with interviews of Rachel's family members and neighbors, who all claimed she had no enemies and was well-liked by everyone. None of the neighbors reported seeing anything suspicious on the day of the murder, including strange cars or individuals near the victim's house. Joe, Rachel's husband, stated he had spent most of the day at a bus depot on the other side of town for work and had a coworker who could confirm his alibi. The coworker corroborated Joe's statement, but the police couldn't shake off their lingering doubts. The scene resembled a robbery, yet nothing of significant value was missing. A sum of €1,000 lay untouched on the bedside table in plain sight, and another stash in the kitchen cupboard was also left undisturbed. In the dressing table, a jewelry box was found, but only a pair of chains and earrings were missing, discovered separately in a drawer. Joe reported that a digital camera, silverware, and one of his dumbbells, likely used as the murder weapon, were also missing. The whole situation seemed bizarre. The house was ransacked, the landlady brutally murdered, all for seemingly trivial items. When questioned by the police, Joe appeared distraught, crying, shaking, and feverish. However, one investigator later noted that Joe's state seemed more like nervous excitement than genuine grief or shock. Joe's behavior became even more suspicious when asked about the possibility of his wife having an affair. He firmly denied it, but then awkwardly added that he had never cheated on his wife, a statement that sounded unconvincing. 2 miles away from the crime scene, a bag was discovered in some bushes. The bag contained a camera, silverware, and a few pieces of jewelry that matched the items reported stolen by Joe. With this new evidence, the initial theory of a robbery gone wrong could be ruled out, and the case was reclassified as a premeditated murder. The widower, who had been trying to show grief and pain, came under suspicion because his emotions seemed insincere, making him the primary suspect. Joe had no evidence to present, so the detectives had to thoroughly investigate his alibi, the crime scene, and his relationship with his wife. Joe claimed that on the morning of the incident, he stopped by the gym, which was a regular part of his routine. Surveillance cameras in the parking lot and the gym confirmed his presence. He then went to the office and later visited a bus station in a remote area of the city to check on the placement of advertisements on vehicles. A colleague corroborated Joe's story, stating that they had spoken on the phone around that time. The investigators then seized Joe's computer from his workplace for further inspection. The emails on Joe's computer contained some suspicious correspondence, which he had partially deleted. However, specialists were able to recover the deleted messages, and the police became convinced they were on the right track. The emails revealed that Joe frequently communicated with his friend and sister, constantly complaining about his wife, Rachel. He used insults and profanity to describe her, stating that she no longer attracted him as a woman and that she caused him outright disgust. Moreover, the computer revealed a suspicious correspondence between Joe and his colleague, Nikki Pelly. It was evident from their communication that their relationship went beyond a friendship, and both of them should be questioned. Nikki Pelly worked at an advertising company and frequently interacted with Joe for work-related purposes. Despite being 10 years older than Joe, she and Joe were having an affair. The exact timeline of their workplace romance was unclear, but it was discovered that Joe spent evenings and nights at Nikki's place. Meanwhile, his wife, Rachel, was under the impression that Joe was busy with work. Joe's messages to Nikki revealed that he promised they would soon be together, along with his sons from his marriage to Rachel. These messages raised suspicions, as the children would likely live with Rachel in the event of a divorce. Initially, Joe denied having any extramarital affairs. However, when confronted with irrefutable evidence of his infidelity, he admitted to secretly dating Nikki for a period before allegedly breaking up. The O'Reilly house was cordoned off as a crime scene for over a week, and no one was allowed to enter while the police thoroughly examined and documented the premises. During this time, Joe lived with his sister at their grandparents' home. At the funeral, Joe's behavior was unexpected. Instead of appearing distraught, he seemed remarkably calm and composed, almost as if he was avoiding the coffin. When it was his turn to bid farewell, he did so briefly and without emotion. As he walked away, he casually remarked that the coffin could be closed and buried. After the family returned home, they found everything in the same state as it was on the day of the crime, except for the absence of the body. Joe asked his in-laws to accompany him, and they agreed, thinking he needed their support. However, upon arriving at the scene, Joe began to speculate about the killer's actions in a way that seemed unusual. He walked around the room where his wife had been murdered, describing the attack in vivid detail. He pointed out dried blood spatters and suggested that the perpetrator might have gone to the bathroom to wash off the blood and clean the crime weapon before taking it with him. Joe's account was disturbingly detailed, and he even used gestures to mimic the blows, which was unsettling to witness. However, his parents thought his behavior was a way to cope with stress and talk about his feelings. Meanwhile, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that her son-in-law was repeating a pattern of behavior and was responsible for their daughter's murder. Shortly after the funeral, Joe started seeking media attention, giving numerous interviews. He invited reporters to his home, giving them a tour of the crime scene and describing what happened. On camera, Joe would address the killer, urging them to surrender to the police. 3 weeks after the tragedy, the family agreed to participate in a TV program about the crime. While Rachel's parents were overcome with grief, Joe acted like a celebrity on set. He chatted with the makeup artists, asked about his on-camera appearance. The police, who still suspected Joe, and followed him and discovered he went to see his mistress, Nikki, after the TV show. By then, they were convinced he was the killer and focused on gathering evidence for the court. Gathering evidence was a lengthy, complicated, and painstaking process, mainly because the key piece of evidence, the instrument of the crime, was never found. However, other crucial evidence was collected. The first to testify were Nikki, Joe's mistress, and the colleague who had previously confirmed Joe's alibi. Both faced potential jail time for perjury and decided to come clean to avoid risking their freedom. Nikki revealed that she and Joe had never actually broken up, despite their earlier claims. In fact, their ongoing relationship had been discovered by Rachel, leading to a major argument between the spouses on the eve of the tragedy. The colleague, on the other hand, admitted that he wasn't entirely sure if Joe was at the bus station on the other side of the city at the time of his wife's murder. He had simply corroborated Joe's story as a favor, without realizing at the time that Joe was a suspect in the crime. Investigators also recovered incriminating correspondence from Joe's computer, including messages where he insulted his wife and made plans for a future with Nikki and their children. Furthermore, after reviewing numerous interviews with Joe and footage from a TV program, police concluded that he had described the crime in disturbing detail, suggesting that only the perpetrator could have known such specifics. Joe's careless comments helped investigators piece together the events of the crime. He began the day by intentionally making an appearance at the gym, ensuring he was captured on camera. Later, he informed his colleagues that he would be working in a different part of the city, and his phone might be out of range. However, instead of heading to the bus station as he claimed, he returned home and armed himself with a dumbbell. He lay in wait in the marital bedroom for his wife, who had taken their children to kindergarten. When she arrived, he launched a surprise attack from behind, leaving her no chance of escape. After the murder, Joe, who later confessed, washed the blood off himself and the dumbbell in the adjacent bathroom. Joe changed his clothes and scattered his belongings to make it look like a robbery. He then went to work, getting rid of the evidence along the way. In an attempt to create an alibi, he called his wife's cell phone, sent her messages, and left voicemails, pretending she was still alive. At work, he acted strangely, appeared overly excited, and had shaky hands. His colleagues noticed this and asked if he was okay, but he seemed confused and rushed to his office. Shortly after, the daycare center called to inform him that his daughter hadn't been picked up. Instead of rushing home, he sent his mother-in-law to the house, where she would be the first to discover her daughter's disfigured body. Joe thought he had covered his tracks and that his guilt would be impossible to prove. However, his desire for fame and public attention ultimately led to his downfall. Despite most of the evidence being circumstantial, Joe was arrested 2 years after committing the crime. The key to proving his guilt lay in reconstructing his movements on the day of the crime, using data from a cell phone that he always carried with him. Notably, at the time of Rachel's murder, Joe's cell phone signal was coming from the family home, which was later verified through phone records. Additionally, it was revealed during the trial that an anonymous letter to Child Protective Services, accusing Rachel of being an abusive mother, was written by Joe's mother at his request. Joe had been trying to discredit his wife, as he knew he would not be granted sole custody of their children in the event of a divorce. However, when social services investigated the claims made in the anonymous letter, they found no evidence to support them. Undeterred, Joe decided to take matters into his own hands. During the trial, he showed no remorse, chatting animatedly with his defense attorneys and even attempting to joke, convinced that he would be acquitted. But in the summer of 2007, the court found Joe guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment. The lawyers attempted to dispute the decision but were unsuccessful, with all their complaints and appeals being denied. Joe and Nikki's relationship continued even after he was imprisoned. She regularly visited him for many years, but they stopped communicating in 2022 for unknown reasons. Throughout his imprisonment, Joe O'Reilly maintained his innocence. He became a well-behaved inmate, avoiding any issues in the hopes of becoming eligible for parole in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan was born in 1987 in Wangjing, China, a major city in former capital. She came from a relatively affluent family, and her parents provided her with the best possible education, fostering her talents and potential. Wang Nan excelled academically, particularly in the sciences. After completing her secondary education, she enrolled in a prestigious university, studying business and Finance fundamentals while mastering multiple foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency, where she established herself as a valuable, responsible, and highly motivated employee. Her career progressed rapidly, and she was soon assigned to Thailand to lead and develop a new branch. Wang Nan was a high-achieving manager at a travel agency, but she left to pursue her own business venture. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which quickly grew into a popular chain under her leadership. As a successful entrepreneur, Wang effectively managed and expanded her business. However, her professional success came at the cost of her personal life. Her last romantic relationship was during her university days, and once she started working, she had no time for dating due to her demanding schedule. Wang, nearing her 30th birthday, wasn't worried about her solitary life, consumed by her business. To improve her Thai skills, she enrolled in courses at a training center. There, she met Yu, who caught her attention by staring before approaching her in Thai. They briefly conversed, and Yu asked why she was studying Thai. Wang replied it was essential for her business growth. You proposed that they exchange business cards so they could arrange to meet again. As a courtesy, Wang gave him her card, and he gave her his in return. According to his card, Yu was involved in the export-import trade in Bangkok, but this information didn't make a significant impression on Wang, who simply put the card in her purse and forgot about it. In contrast, Yu seemed truly interested and followed up by calling Wang the very next day. However, she was too preoccupied with work at that time and politely turned down his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, the situation recurred. Wang declined another date, citing her busy schedule and preparations for a business conference where she aimed to expand her professional network. However, Yu appeared at the event, bearing a lavish bouquet of flowers. He waited for Wang to become available, then approached her and asked her out again. Wang was won over by Yu's persistence, as no one had ever pursued her so fervently. She agreed to dinner, marking the beginning of an unexpected romance. Yu fell deeply in love with Wang, showering her with attention, surprises, and gifts. He sent flowers and sweet notes every morning and called her twice a day. Wang's feelings were mixed, irritated by his intensity but flattered by his efforts. She found herself in a romantic relationship again, swept up by his wooing. Wang Nan was thrilled to discover that Yu shared her passions and hobbies. To win her heart, Yu made an effort to learn how to cook her favorite meals and surprised her with tickets to thrilling events. Not only was Yu charming, but he was also very supportive, always willing to lend a hand whenever Wang Nan needed it, whether at work or at home. Wang Nan felt like she was on cloud nine, but one thing bothered her. After just a few months of dating, Yu was already talking about getting married and even suggesting names for their future kids. Wang Nan was taken aback by Yu's eagerness, but he justified it by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and it was time to start a family. Wang Nan was unsure how to respond, feeling uncertain about Yu's suitability as a life partner. After a heart-to-heart conversation, where Wang Nan expressed her doubts, Yu vowed to prove his love. That night, he sent her a heartfelt letter, reaffirming his commitment to being a devoted husband and father. In the morning, Wang found Yu waiting on her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. He proclaimed his serious intentions and readiness to marry her immediately. Wang Nan joked that the courthouse wouldn't be open for another hour and a half. However, Yu suggested going there right away, and if it was open, they would register their marriage on the spot. Wang agreed, confident that the courthouse would be closed. But to her surprise, they found it open, and the officer was already at his desk, ready to register their marriage registration. It was revealed that Yu had made prior arrangements, requesting a special exception to formalize their marriage early in the morning. The wedding was unusual, with no guests, rings, wedding dress, or photos. Wang couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't real, especially since she hadn't introduced Yu to her mother, with whom she was very close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate. Wang and Yu had a troubled family life. Wang regretted her marriage almost immediately after it was registered. Initially, she had hoped that Yu would be a good husband and a reliable partner. However, her hopes were soon dashed as Yu revealed his true nature. He spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money, and contributing nothing to the household income. When Wang asked him why he didn't work, Yu claimed that his business was experiencing a seasonal downturn and that he could take a break. However, this downturn had been ongoing for an extended period, prompting Wang to investigate her husband's business. She discovered that his supposed export-import business was merely a facade, existing only on paper and business cards. At that moment, Wang realized the gravity of her mistake in not creating a prenuptial agreement. This meant her husband, Yu, had the freedom to spend her earnings as he pleased and could claim her property in the event of a divorce. They had a heart-to-heart conversation, during which Yu broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find employment. However, It soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for a job and was content to rely on his wife's financial support. Yu, a grown man, regularly behaved immaturely, devoting most of his time to playing computer games. On the rare occasions when he helped with household chores or assisted his wife at their restaurant, he would request money from her for personal expenses. Wang eventually reached her limit and informed Yu she wouldn't give him any more money until he secured employment. The next day, following this conversation, Yu vanished, taking their marriage certificate and Wang's identity card with him. It wasn't until the evening, when Wang received a call from her accountant inquiring about a large sum of money transferred from her account, that she realized the item were missing. She was shocked, as she hadn't authorized any transfers, but she immediately suspected Yu. The transferred amount exceeded $500,000, which Yu had moved into his personal account by providing the bank with their marriage certificate, Wang's documents, and a claim that the money was jointly managed. Wang immediately reported the theft to the police, and her husband, Yu, was tracked down a few hours later when he tried to withdraw some of the stolen funds. Yu broke down in tears and begged for his wife's forgiveness, revealing that he had accumulated a large debt due to his gambling addiction and was being threatened. It was also revealed that Yu had a previous run-in with the law, having served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in China. Wang was both shocked and ashamed, realizing she was not as familiar with her husband as she had thought. Despite this, she viewed gambling as an illness and felt driven to support her husband in overcoming his addiction and resuming a normal life. Wang not only agreed to pay off half of Yu's debt but also offered him a job as a manager at one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu seemed grateful and took his new role seriously, even devising a successful strategy for the restaurant's development. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived, and he soon began spending more time playing computer games and engaging in other leisure activities. During that time, Wang found out she was pregnant and told her husband, Yu. However, he reacted strangely and aggressively, saying he wasn't ready for a child and wanted her to have an abortion. Wang refused, and Yu threatened to divorce her and divide their property through the court. He didn't speak to her for several days but then apologized and changed his behavior. Yu explained that he had said hurtful things in the heat of the moment but was actually happy about the pregnancy. He started showing care and helping out around the house again. 2 months later, Wang was happy because her marriage had improved, and Yu was being attentive and responsible. He was preparing their home for the arrival of the baby and doing his job as a manager. One day, Yu suggested getting life and health insurance for Wang because of her pregnancy, to protect her and the baby in case of unexpected events. Wang agreed and wondered why she hadn't thought of it earlier. They got the insurance the next day, and a couple of weeks later, Yu suggested taking a vacation to relax and unwind. Wang was initially hesitant about taking a trip, but her husband persuaded her by pointing out that they had never had a honeymoon and would soon be too busy with their baby to travel. He also emphasized that they needed a break to clear their minds after a tough period. Eventually, Wang agreed to the trip. Her husband took charge of planning the trip, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities to ensure a balance of excitement, education, and relaxation, given Wang's pregnancy. Wang was happy to let him handle everything and was pleased to see how enthusiastic he was about their vacation. On June 7th, they arrived at the park and spent the day exploring, taking in the beautiful views and sights. As it was a summer Friday evening, the park was crowded with visitors. As the evening wore on, Wang noticed that her husband was becoming increasingly agitated and nervous. When she asked if everything was okay, he replied that the large crowds of tourists were ruining their chances of a peaceful and private sunset viewing. Wang Nan eventually agreed that it would be romantic to watch the sunset, as the park would become less crowded as the sun dipped below the horizon. Yu climbed over the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, telling her about the breathtaking view. However, Wang refused to join him, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu became angry but returned to her after a few minutes. He suggested that they should come back to the park to watch the sunrise instead. Since they returned to their hotel well past midnight, they decided to sleep in on Saturday and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. On Sunday, June 9th, a couple, Yu and Wang, visited the national park to watch the sunrise. They woke up at 3 a.m. and arrived at the park while it was still dark, finding the area mostly deserted. From an observation deck, they admired the dawn. Afterwards, Yu went down to a cliff and encouraged Wang to join him to see the rock paintings. Wang was hesitant, but Yu assured her it was safe and promised to help her down and then climb back up. She trusted him and cautiously approached the cliff. The view was breathtaking. Yu hugged Wang and asked if she had any regrets in life. She replied confidently that she didn't. Yu then ran his hand through her hair, kissed her cheek, and leaned in to whisper, "Die." He loosened his grip and pushed Wang down the cliff. He checked to ensure no one was watching, looked down but couldn't see where she had fallen. There was only silence, indicating no one had seen or heard anything. Yu walked calmly towards the park exit, intending to report the incident only after Wang was surely dead. However, a few hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wang's body on the rocks and quickly called for rescue. As Yu left the reserve, several emergency vehicles with flashing lights and sirens sped past him. Realizing what was happening, he returned to the scene where his wife had fallen. Upon his return, Yu put on a dramatic display of grief, crying and screaming for help. Convinced that Wang was already dead, he thought no one would uncover the truth. But, as it turned out, Wang's fall was cushioned by tree branches, bushes, and rocks, which slowed her descent and saved her life, as well as the life of her unborn child. Though she suffered serious injuries, Wang suddenly opened her eyes and attempted to speak. Her husband's initial horror was evident to everyone present, but he quickly regained composure, leaned in close to Wang, and whispered in Chinese that she should remain silent if she wanted to live. Wang suffered severe injuries, including head trauma, multiple fractures, internal organ damage, and significant blood loss. Her spine was also badly damaged, leading doctors to worry that she might never walk again. She spent several days in a coma, during which her husband, Yu, stayed by her side. However, whenever he was alone with her, he thought about how to end her life without arousing suspicion. When Wang regained consciousness, Yu was extremely nervous, fearing she would reveal the truth to the police. He refused to leave her alone, even for a moment. Whenever he had the opportunity, he threatened her, claiming he had nothing to lose. Initially, Wang corroborated Yu's account, attributing her fall to dizziness. However, when Yu briefly left her side, Wang asked a nurse to call the police and prevent Yu from re-entering the room. It was then that she revealed the shocking truth, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu burst into the room, claiming his wife was insane due to a head injury and that he would never hurt her or the baby. However, his words lacked conviction, and he was taken into custody at the hospital that same day. He faced multiple charges, including attempted murder and intimidation, for trying to silence his wife. Initially, Wang had hoped to save her pregnancy, as the baby had survived the fall. However, the doctors advised an abortion due to the strong painkillers, multiple surgeries under general anesthesia, and the need for antibiotics. They prioritized Wang's life, as the fetus would likely not survive the effects of the medication. This news was devastating for Wang, but she followed the doctor's advice. Yu consistently denied his guilt and maintained that the event was an accident. In prison, he remained calm and hired skilled lawyers, confident that he could avoid or minimize punishment. Investigators and the prosecutor were convinced that he committed the crime out of self-interest, seeking a substantial insurance payout and his wife's significant fortune of nearly $2.5 million. However, during one interrogation, Yu stunned everyone by revealing another motive for his heinous act. He harbored resentment towards his wife, Wang, for agreeing to only pay off half of his debt, which he accumulated due to his gambling addiction. Yu believed that if his wife truly loved him, she would have covered all of his debts, given her financial means. He concluded that Wang did not love him and felt justified in punishing her. In March 2021, Yu was convicted and received a life sentence. However, Song and his lawyers submitted multiple appeals. 6 months later, the Thai court reduced the sentence to 33 years in prison, showing unusual leniency. Wang and her loved ones were shocked, arguing that such a light sentence would set a bad precedent and potentially encourage others to commit similar horrific crimes. In Yu's case, his relatives claimed that he was a wealthy businessman and that Wang married him for selfish reasons. However, this claim cannot be proven as Yu has nothing but huge debts. As for Wang, despite the doctor's predictions, she was able to recover after undergoing a series of complicated surgeries and a long rehabilitation process. She learned to walk again and spent most of her earnings on her recovery. In 2023, Wang returned to work and was able to revive her once successful business. She also founded an organization dedicated to helping women who are victims of domestic violence and runs her own blog, where she shares her experiences and warns women against making the same mistakes she did. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Stephanie Scott. Stephanie Scott was a 26-year-old kind and intelligent young woman with a passion for education, much like her father, Robert. As a teacher, she enjoyed teaching English and drama at Leeton High School, a job that gave her a great sense of pride and fulfillment. She was known for her enthusiasm, love for learning, and beautiful smile. Stephanie and Aaron's friendship, formed in their youth, blossomed into romance as they entered adulthood. They began dating in 2012 and, after several years of building a life together, decided to take the next step and get married. As the big day, April 11, 2015, was just around the corner, the wedding preparations were well underway. With everything set and almost complete, from catering and decor to travel plans, all they needed to finalize was a dress rehearsal for their special day, dance lessons, and romantic honeymoon arrangements. In early April, Aaron invited Stephanie to a party out of town, but she declined, opting to stay behind and complete some deadline tasks, including preparing lesson plans for her upcoming absence. On Easter Sunday, April 5, 2015, Stephanie went to her school in Leeton, New South Wales, to drop off some homework with a substitute teacher. She parked her car on the street and met a colleague who lived nearby. Together, they opened the school gates and went inside. After locking the gates behind them, Stephanie went to the English department office, where she sent a confirmation email to a bus company about transportation for her wedding guests. After working for a couple more hours, Stephanie felt relieved that she had completed all her tasks. She left the administrative building and headed towards the gates. Meanwhile, Aaron was expecting Stephanie to be away for a few hours, but as the evening approached, he began to worry because he hadn't heard from her. On April 5th, she didn't reply to his messages. When he returned home after 7 p.m., he found that Stephanie was still not there, and her car was missing from the street. At first, Aaron tried to reassure himself that Stephanie might be feeling overwhelmed by the upcoming wedding and her responsibilities as a teacher, and that she just needed some time to herself. Aaron became increasingly concerned as hours passed. As his worry grew, he sent her another text in the morning, then called her family. After Stephanie's disappearance exceeded 24 hours, Aaron reported her missing at the Leeton police station. The police investigation revealed her car was also missing, leading them to speculate she may have been in an accident or stranded while driving away from Leeton High School. To assist in the search, helicopters were deployed and officers were sent to the school. The police investigation was hindered by the limited number of people at the school on Easter Sunday, but this also helped rule out hundreds of suspects. According to the report, Stephanie had deactivated and reactivated the classroom alarm system between 1:30 p.m. and 1:38 p.m. Unfortunately, this was the only concrete detail the police could gather. Attempts to track Stephanie's phone were unsuccessful, as it was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media showed no activity after Saturday, April 4th. A witness who was near Leeton High School on Easter Sunday reported hearing unusual noises around 2 p.m., including rustling and dragging sounds. At the time, the witness saw Stephanie's car parked under a covered walkway, but didn't think much of it. However, the car was later found to be missing. A school employee who was questioned by detectives reported an unusual conversation he had with one of the school's cleaners the day after Stephanie's disappearance. The employee asked the cleaner when he last saw Stephanie, and the cleaner replied that he hadn't seen her on the day she went missing. When questioned about the possibility of Stephanie running away due to wedding stress, Vincent Stanford, the 24-year-old cleaner, responded with a nervous laugh. The witness who observed this interaction also noticed that Vincent had scratches on his face. As a result, the police decided to investigate further and asked Vincent for more information. During the brief conversation with detectives, Vincent explained that he had stopped by the school to empty the trash cans, despite not being scheduled to work that day. He claimed he was in a hurry to buy groceries and only stayed for a short time. Vincent stated that he did not see Stephanie during his visit. He also reported leaving the school around 3 p.m. to go to his usual store. The police investigation took a significant turn when they discovered that the store Vincent claimed to have visited on the specified date was actually closed. This raised suspicions about Vincent's alibi, and investigators decided to question him further. A search of Vincent's home, with his mother's consent, led to the discovery of a key set matching the description of Stephanie Scott's keys. The search of Vincent's home and belongings yielded additional evidence, including several MDF panels in the back seat of his car, which appeared to be stained with blood. Police also noticed tire tracks in front of the house that didn't match Vincent's vehicle. A used condom was found on the ground near the house, with its wrapper discovered in Vincent's bedroom. When questioned about his whereabouts on the day of the murder, Vincent said he was out taking photos. He pointed to a camera in his car as proof, but this explanation only added to the suspicion surrounding him. Detectives obtained permission from Vincent to view the camera. When they turned it on, they saw a disturbing photo of a charred woman's corpse in a wooded area. Vincent attempted to downplay the image, claiming it was a still from a movie he had filmed that he thought was humorous. However, the police quickly realized that the photo was, in fact, a crime scene image of Stephanie Scott. Vincent Stanford, a 24-year-old cleaner at Leon High School, was immediately taken into custody. A search of Vincent's phone and laptop uncovered disturbing photos, including images of young girls and women he had been stalking. A new witness came forward on April 17th, reporting that they saw a car near a canal on Easter Sunday at around 4 p.m. The witness described a man getting out of the car and throwing something that looked like a laptop into the water before driving away. The police retrieved the laptop from the canal and confirmed that it belonged to Stephanie. Meanwhile, divers searched the New South Wales River area for her body. As the search continued, police thoroughly searched fields and vineyards near where Stephanie's car was found earlier in the week, as well as the canal where the laptop was discovered. In a surprising turn of events, Vincent, who was already in custody, requested to speak with the police. He provided detailed information about the crime, including the location of Stephanie's body. According to Vincent, on the day of the incident, Stephanie was working on a computer in the upstairs teacher's room with her door open. Vincent claimed that he was cleaning the area and needed to take some bins upstairs, which is when he encountered Stephanie. Vincent told detectives that he acted on a sudden urge to kill Stephanie by retrieving a kit containing handcuffs, Viagra, a knife, and cleaning supplies from his home. He had also researched violent crimes online. Upon returning, he found Stephanie preparing to leave and, as she walked by, she smiled and wished him a happy Easter. Vincent then grabbed her and dragged her into a storage room. When questioned about the scratches on his face, Vincent attributed them to Stephanie's microphone and her fingernails as she defended herself. He described grabbing her from behind, covering her mouth and wrapping his arm around her waist, before dragging her to the storage room. Once inside, he slammed the door shut, threw her to the ground, and punched her repeatedly. Vincent stabbed Stephanie to death, motivated by a twisted pleasure in the act rather than hatred. He acknowledged a history of violent thoughts and suspected underlying psychological issues. Afterwards, he calmly returned home to eat and drink, leaving her body in the storage room. Vincent returned to the school and put Stephanie's body in the trunk of her car. He then drove the car to his home and parked it on the street. The next day, Easter Monday, Vincent drove the car to a national park. There, he removed Stephanie's body from the trunk and left it on the ground. He observed that her face was severely bruised and swollen, with a large bruise under her eye. Vincent covered the body with branches and doused it with gasoline. He then used a match to set the body on fire and discarded the match. For a short time, Vincent stayed at the scene, taking several photos of Stephanie's body with his camera. He waited for a few minutes to ensure the fire was burning steadily before leaving. Afterward, he abandoned Stephanie's car on a remote country road and walked back to town. Vincent denied brutally treating Stephanie, despite detectives knowing otherwise. He faced additional charges of severe harm and physical injury. Questioned about photos of the woman partially undressed, Vincent claimed he often removed her clothes, leaving her bra, which he kept as a souvenir. However, Vincent had actually sent the wedding and graduation rings to his twin brother, Marcus, in Adelaide. Marcus sold the stolen items at a jewelry store and destroyed Stephanie's driver's license after taking a photo of it. A 24-year-old man, identified as Marcus, was arrested at his home in the Adelaide Hills at 7 a.m. Marcus worked on a flower farm and was described by colleagues as quiet and reserved, rarely interacting with them outside of work. During the trial, Marcus Stanford was unrepresented by a lawyer. When the judge asked if there were any reasons he should not be sent to Leeton, Marcus responded in a strong Dutch accent that he had never been to Leeton and saw no reason to go. The search for Stephanie eventually came to a tragic end. While Vincent was still confessing to the crime, the police had already discovered Stephanie's body, just one day before her scheduled wedding date. A badly burned female body was found in a national park, approximately 60 miles from Leeton Middle School. A thorough investigation revealed that Stephanie had suffered a brutal attack, receiving 40 blows to the head, which ultimately led to her death. She had also been stabbed in the neck before her body was discarded and set on fire. Photographs found on Vincent's phone were identified as being of Stephanie, leaving no doubt about his guilt. Both Vincent and his brother Marcus were brought to trial. Initially, Vincent denied any involvement in the crime. Vincent Stanford was deemed a danger to society after undergoing psychological tests, which indicated he was a potential serial killer. He showed a disturbing lack of emotions and empathy, often reacting to serious situations with laughter and indifference. Further investigation into his past revealed several alarming incidents. Vincent was born in Australia, but his family relocated to the Netherlands when he was 3 years old. They later returned to New South Wales when he was 7. As a child, Vincent exhibited concerning behavior, including fantasizing about committing murder at the age of 12 and nearly strangling his teacher. His classmates described him as a psychopath, and he was eventually sent to a behavioral correction school due to his violent and disobedient behavior. Vincent would sneak into the women's restroom to secretly observe female students during lunch breaks. His phone contained 2,000 photos of a young girl and a diary documenting his observations, including following her home and recording her schedule. One entry read, "She's home alone at 15:40. Enough time to abduct." The investigation into Stephanie Scott's murder took a surprising turn when her killer's twin brother, Marcus Stanford, was found to be involved. A search of the Stanford home uncovered evidence, including Stephanie's blood on a knife and her bra. Marcus was sentenced to 15 months in prison for selling Stephanie's stolen jewelry and aiding his brother. After his release in October 2016, the Leeton community expressed outrage and made it clear Marcus was not welcome. A petition with over 60 signatures called for an appeal of the court's decision. Marcus briefly returned to Leeton before leaving the area, and his current whereabouts are unknown. Marcus has expressed genuine remorse for his past actions and has acknowledged that his behavior was reckless and regrettable. Since his release, he has made it clear that he intends to avoid trouble and move forward with his life. However, he also wants to maintain his distance from his twin brother, Vincent, and has no interest in rekindling their relationship. Vincent has been sentenced to life in prison for murder and 15 years for aggravated sexual assault, with both sentences effective as of April 8, 2015. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson was born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to parents William, Bill, Rachel, and Patricia, Trish, Rachel. She grew up with a younger brother, John, with whom she shared a close family bond. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she excelled academically as a member of the National Honor Society. She was also an active athlete, participating in soccer and volleyball. Despite the unconventional nature of her career aspirations, Rachel had always dreamed of becoming a funeral director since childhood. This passion led her to pursue a degree in mortuary science at Youngstown State University. Her hard work and dedication earned her recognition as one of the top students in her field and secured a scholarship. Following her undergraduate studies, Rachel enrolled in the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Mortuary Science. She became a member of the Ohio Funeral Directors Association and moved to Columbus, where she completed an internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. Rachel approached her work with great respect and saw it as her duty to support and care for families during difficult times. Rachel's internship was nearing its end, and she had high hopes of becoming a permanent employee at the Bureau. On January 26, Rachel Anderson celebrated her 24th birthday. The next day, her brother John visited her from Warren. Before he left to return home on January 28, Rachel gave him the key to her apartment. However, John accidentally took the key with him when he left. Later that day, Rachel realized she had misplaced her key and contacted John Kennedy, who had a spare, to arrange a pickup. After speaking with her mother around 6:30 p.m., Rachel retrieved her key from Kennedy. Since her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, she had to leave it unlocked. Rachel stopped for dinner at her favorite restaurant and arrived home around 7:30 p.m. As she entered her apartment, she was confronted by a man who was waiting for her. He abducted her, taking her to the top floor of the building, where he restrained her using various objects. The man bound Rachel's feet and ankles with a hair dryer cord, tied her hands with a belt and blinds cords, and used a curling iron cord to restrain her wrists. He also gagged her to silence her. A man then forced Rachel to reveal her PIN numbers and subjected her to torture, abuse, and physical harm. Ultimately, he strangled her with a cord from an electric blanket, causing blunt force trauma and the stab wound to her head. After the attack, the man hid Rachel's body in a closet, leaving her partially naked with the electric blanket cord still tied around her neck. He then stole her car and used her bank cards to make purchases at several stores in Columbus. Forensic evidence revealed that bruising and red marks on Rachel's ankles and wrists suggested she was alive when the perpetrator restrained her. A DNA sample was discovered on the rope used to tie her up and on Rachel's body. The coroner's autopsy report concluded that Rachel's death was caused by a stab wound to the head and neck, contradicting the initial theory of strangulation. After interviewing Rachel's co-workers and her ex-boyfriend, who had an alibi, detectives explored alternative explanations for the attack. They returned to Rachel's apartment to search for clues, hoping to identify the perpetrator. During this search, they found Rachel's purse, which was missing her wallet, on the living room floor. 2 weeks later, Rachel's mother discovered the 9-inch steak knife used in the stabbing in a box in the apartment. Detectives initially thought the crime was a robbery, but the brutality and torture inflicted on Rachel suggested that the perpetrator was not just a thief, but a skilled and sadistic individual who took pleasure in exerting power over his victim. The investigators considered various motives but had no suspects and kept the investigation details secret to avoid compromising the case. Later, DNA samples were found on Rachel's body and at the crime scene, but unfortunately, they did not match anyone in the Special Services database. Fortunately, a surveillance video showed 2 people using Rachel's car to drive around the city after her death, and cash was withdrawn from her debit and credit cards. An investigation revealed a crucial lead when a phone number linked to the night of January 28, 2018, at Rachel's apartment was identified. Location data analysis led authorities to the suspect. Anthony Perrin, a 54-year-old convicted offender, was arrested. He had spent 33 years in prison for violent crimes, including rape, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Anthony Perrin had a turbulent past, beginning with his upbringing by grandparents, then living with his mother. Mental health diagnoses, including conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder, indicated serious social problems. He entered a youth commission facility at age 14, then transitioned into foster care. At 15, Anthony faced his first charge in 1980 for abusing a young foster brother he babysat. A year later, he threatened his girlfriend's mother with a knife and attempted to drown her before fleeing. In 1982, Anthony Perrin was convicted of crimes in Franklin at 17 and served 24 years. After release in 2006, he moved to Georgia, was charged with forgery in 2007, and spent 9 more years in prison. Released in 2017, he returned to Ohio, required to check in with the sheriff's department every 90 days. On August 21, 2017, Anthony was caught with a woman in his car. 6 days later, he was stopped for driving without a license and found with a knife and shotgun, but wasn't arrested. Later, CCTV footage showed Rachel's car outside a store, with a man getting out of the passenger side. The driver wasn't visible, but police identified the man as Anthony Slits. He was questioned and revealed he was approached by a man who offered him money to cash in his ex-girlfriend's cards. Slits confirmed Anthony's identity and outlined their route on January 28, 2018, when they tried to cash out Rachel's stolen cards. Anthony Perrin remained at large until his capture on February 9, 2018, when he was taken into custody following a multi-day stakeout of his sister's home. Anthony was charged with multiple counts of serious crimes, including burglary, robbery, kidnapping, rape, and murder. Nearly 2 years later, his trial began on February 4, 2020, and 4 witnesses testified on the first day, including Rachel's co-worker Jonathan Kennedy, who was the person who found Rachel. The trial continued with testimony from Jonathan and the manager of the apartment complex where the crime occurred. Officer Frank Ghani, who was parked outside the apartment when the body was discovered, also testified and shared the surveillance footage with the jury. On the same day, Anthony expressed dissatisfaction with his attorneys to the judge and requested new representation. However, it became apparent that Anthony was intentionally delaying the proceedings. The prosecution presented expert witnesses on February 10, including a latent print expert, who explained how technology was used to track the use of Rachel Anderson's debit card and its connection to the crime scene. The defendant's sister also testified, revealing that her brother had given her the debit card, claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. However, after watching news reports, she discovered that the card actually belonged to Rachel. The final day of testimony was February 11th. The medical examiner testified that the defendant's DNA was found at the crime scene. Additionally, a forensic pathologist and a deputy coroner from the Franklin County office provided details about the extent of Rachel Anderson's injuries. During the final hearing on February 12th, Assistant Prosecutor Amy Van Killen presented the state's closing argument, outlining the events of the crime and asserting that Anthony had murdered Rachel Anderson in cold blood. In contrast, defense attorney Larry Thomas acknowledged that Anthony had used Rachel's cards, but argued that he was not responsible for the crime. The defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case lacked concrete evidence, as the DNA and cell phone data did not definitively link Anthony Perrin to the crime. However, after deliberating for approximately 6 hours over 2 days, the jury of 4 men and 8 women found him guilty on all counts. The prosecution pursued the death penalty due to the severity of the crime, which involved the murder of Rachel Anderson during an aggravated burglary. Additionally, Anthony's prior conviction for a similar attempted murder of a woman weighed against him. Prosecutor Bryan stated that some individuals consistently disregard the law, and Anthony Perrin is a prime example. The sentencing phase of the trial began on February 18th. In an attempt to mitigate the sentence, the defense presented evidence of Anthony's troubled childhood, but the prosecution counter-argued that the aggravating circumstances of the case outweighed any mitigating factors. During the trial, it was established that Anthony Perrin was fully aware of his actions when he attacked Rachel. Despite this, several people testified on his behalf, including his mother, sister, a psychologist, and a former teacher. Anthony also addressed the jury, sharing a 13-minute unscripted statement about his troubled past, including an abusive childhood and difficulties after being released from prison. In his statement, Anthony described feeling helpless and claimed that the system had failed him. He blamed the justice system for his current situation but did not directly address the crime or apologize for it. After deliberating for 3.5 hours, the jury was unable to agree on the death penalty and instead recommended life in prison without parole. The sentencing took place on March 16, 2020. Rachel's mother was visibly emotional in court as the verdict was announced. Rachel's father also spoke, expressing his surprise at how Anthony, a repeat offender with a history of violence, was able to make demands and become hysterical during the investigation. The case of Rachel Anderson's murder drew to a close as Anthony Perrin's sentence was handed down. However, what stood out was not the severity of the sentence, but rather the disturbing behavior of one individual, Anthony Perrin himself. As an adult, he shifted the blame away from himself and onto the system, denying any personal responsibility for his heinous actions. Despite his efforts to deflect blame, Anthony received 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, one for aggravated murder and another for violent crimes. In addition, he was given 63 more years for other crimes including burglary, kidnapping, robbery, and various violent offenses. This marked a total sentence of multiple consecutive life terms plus 63 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Su Xingqi. Tam Xing Fai, a 43-years-old faculty member, was noticeably absent from work, sparking concern among his colleagues. On July 4th, a coworker named Ma tried to reach him on his mobile phone at 11 a.m., but there was no answer. Ma wasn't immediately worried, assuming Tam Xing Fai was busy taking care of his family's adopted dog, which had a skin disease and was scheduled to visit the vet. However, when Xing Fai failed to show up for a meeting at the university's finance department on July 5th, Ma's concern grew. He tried calling Xing Fai's mobile phone again, but there was still no answer. Unfortunately, Ma didn't have Xing Fai's landline phone number, so he couldn't try contacting him that way. By July 6, Xing Fai had been absent from work for 2 days with no communication with his colleagues. One of his co-workers finally reported the situation to the finance department, which prompted Xing Fai's superiors to call his landline phone. Unfortunately, no one answered that call either. The police contacted the library where Helen Tong Yenyi, the 33-year-old wife of the missing man. Library staff reported that she was also absent from work without prior notice. They, originally from Zhongshan in Guangdong Province, China, had been married for 11 years and had 2 daughters, Hiu Man, 10, and Hiu Ing, 7 years old. Despite their difficult living conditions and financial struggles, the family was known to be kind, happy, and cheerful. They lived in an abandoned recycling station on Huazhu South Road, but Xing Fai often took his daughters on outings to have fun in town. Their children were well behaved, and the family seemed to be a happy one. Given their circumstances, it was possible that the family had decided to take a vacation together. However, something unexpected must have happened, preventing them from returning. Xing Fai's colleagues repeatedly tried to contact him by phone, hoping for a response. Eventually, someone answered, but to their surprise, it was a middle-aged man with an unfamiliar voice, not a member of the family. A man claiming to be Xing Fai's cousin called his workplace, stating that the family had taken a summer vacation to Guangdong Province in mainland China. He allegedly received Xing Fai's phone for safekeeping, but couldn't provide a return date for the family. However, the call only heightened suspicion among Xing Fai's co-workers. They found it out of character for Xing Fai to suddenly leave without notice, as he was a diligent and organized person. If he planned a vacation, he would have arranged it with his children's school in advance. Moreover, the family was responsible for 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would care for them. Xing Fai's family situation also raised questions. His father, a sailor, had gone missing, and his mother was living in a nursing home due to illness. Xing Fai regularly visited her every week, making it unlikely that he would abandon her to go on vacation. Eventually, the police were called. One of Xing Fai's colleagues accompanied them to his home, an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During the trip, a suspicious person was spotted. A short man was seen from a distance near the Xing Fai family's fence before quickly disappearing. Initially, no attention was paid to this, and they continued on. Upon arrival, they found the gate to Xing Fai's home locked. The police investigated the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covered a large area of approximately 450 square meters, but most of it was empty space, about 350 square meters of flower beds. The construction area was only about 90 square meters, and the building was constructed illegally. The original owner had built several tin houses on the site, using it as a waste recycling facility. A stone house on the opposite side was used as a pig farm, with very few people living in the area. As a result, the police only had one neighbor to question, an elderly woman named Wang who lived alone across the street. Wang claimed to have known the family's schedule and reported that they usually tended to their garden in the afternoon. Su Wang had limited knowledge of the family's personal lives, mainly due to their remote location. She was aware that the family didn't receive many visitors, and the only relative she knew of was Xing Fai's cousin, Su Xingqi. Wang didn't have information about Su Xingqi's address or that of Xing Fai's uncle, who supposedly lived in a nearby stone house. When the police questioned Xing Fai's colleague, they learned that a cousin had answered Xing Fai's phone, leading the police to believe it was Su Xingqi. However, Wang clarified that she didn't know Su Xingqi's address. She did report hearing cries for help from the house on July 5. In response, the police conducted door-to-door inquiries in Pingqi village and eventually tracked down a man matching Wang's description at a stone house on Huazhu Road. The man, 42 years old Zhu Shenqi, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin and stated that he occasionally visited the family home to help with renovations and gardening. When questioned about the phone call, Zhu Shenqi maintained that the family had gone on vacation to China. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home and then returned home to inform Zhu Shenqi that he planned to travel to Danyuan, China for a few days. Due to the high roaming fees, Xing Fai asked Zhu Shenqi to hold on to his Hong Kong mobile phone until he returned. The person seen fleeing the scene by police and Xing Fai's colleague was actually Zhu Shenqi, who was leaving after feeding the family dogs. Zhu Shenqi's behavior and expressions were observed, and he appeared to be telling the truth. His story seemed consistent, and there were no obvious discrepancies. When asked if he had a key to the family home, Zhu Shenqi denied it. Despite finding Zhu Shenqi, the police continued their investigation. Going door to door in the village. A local resident reported a stranger borrowed money from a villager, leading to a heated argument. The villager threatened to seek compensation from Xing Fai's family, who were struggling financially due to his mother's hospitalization and existing debts. The villagers initially believed the stranger was not Zhu Shenqi, but they suspected the family might be hiding to escape their debts. However, when the police inquired about Zhu Shenqi, the villagers revealed that he had been dishonest. They confirmed that Zhu Shenqi regularly visited the Xing Fai's home to perform maintenance and repairs, and he was always able to enter the house on his own, even when no one else was present. This information led the police to conclude that Zhu Shenqi must have had a key or access to the home Xing Fai's. In fact, he did have a key, which Xing Fai had given to him, as witnessed by Wang. When the police asked Zhu Shenqi for the key, he initially denied owning one, claiming he used a spare key for renovations that he had returned. However, his demeanor had changed, and he was avoiding key details. When the police threatened to search his home, Zhu Shenqi became agitated and suddenly remembered another house key that he had not returned. He retrieved the key from his dresser and handed it over to the police. Although Zhu Shenqi's behavior was suspicious, there was no direct evidence linking him to the family's disappearance. As a result, the police placed him under surveillance while continuing their investigation. During their investigation, police used a spare key to enter the home, where they found a scene of disarray and evidence of a ransacking. Fresh blood stains on the walls suggested that a violent incident had occurred on the property. The presence of a sink full of dirty dishes in the kitchen raised suspicions about the family's claim to have traveled to China, as it seemed unlikely they would have left their home in such a state before departing. A search of the master bedroom turned up the family's identification cards in a dresser, which prompted the lead investigator to contact the border crossing office. The office reported that the family had not left Hong Kong. Further investigation of the house uncovered a blood-stained shirt in a side room and a blood-stained plastic water pipe in the corner. Police then deployed sniffer dogs to search for additional evidence and potentially locate the missing family members. The dogs detected a scent and discovered blood stains under recently disturbed soil 9 meters away. Furthermore, despite it being summer vacation, their children, Hiu Man and Hiu Eng, were enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family would not have been on vacation. It became clear that the family had been victims of a crime, so a special team was set up to investigate. Due to the late hour, the police cordoned off the scene, restricted access to Pingqi village. Zhu Shenqi was confined to home. He was the prime suspect in the case. Zhu Shenqi promptly confessed. According to Zhu Shenqi's statement, he was from Huanpu in Guangdong province and typically resided with his sister, wife, and 2 sons, aged 15 and 16, who suffered from memory issues. Zhu Shenqi previously earned a living selling motorcycles in Junction City. However, Following Guangdong's ban on motorcycles in 2006, sales plummeted. Financial struggles led him to reach out to his cousin, Xing Fai, in Hong Kong, seeking employment opportunities. Xing Fai helped Su Xingqi secure a construction job that provided a daily salary of 500 Hong Kong dollars, including accommodation and meals. After working for half a month, Su Xingqi became dissatisfied with his salary, which was reduced to 220 Hong Kong dollars due to company deductions. He impulsively quit his job and returned to China. However, in 2007, a typhoon damaged his home, and he needed money for repairs. Su Xingqi asked Xing Fai to help him find work in Hong Kong again. When Xing Fai couldn't find him a job, he proposed an alternative arrangement. Xing Fai would pay Su Xingqi from his own salary to help with household chores and repairs at his home. Su Xingqi accepted this offer and began traveling to Hong Kong every other month to work on Xing Fai's home and garden. Su Xingqi claims that he and Tong Yanyi, Xing Fai's wife, began a clandestine romantic relationship. However, Xing Fai discovered their relationship on July 3. On July 5, Su Xingqi accompanied Xing Fai to a nursing home to visit his mother. Su Xingqi snuck out of the nursing home to return home and continue his affair with Yan Yi. Unexpectedly, Xing Fai returned home early and, in a fit of rage, physically confronted Su Xingqi. In a state of panic, the man grabbed a 25-centimeter-long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai until he fell to the ground, dead. Overwhelmed by what had just happened, he wanted to turn himself in to the police. However, Su Xingqi refused to let that happen. Since he couldn't change his mind, Su Xingqi decided to kill Xing Fai. Su Xingqi found some wires in the corner of the room, charged at him, knocked him to the ground, and tied his hands behind his back. Su Xingqi then covered Xing Fai's mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over his head. Before this, their two children were in their bedroom watching cartoons. They heard the commotion and their parents warning to run away, but instead, they ran towards their parents and saw their father dead and Su Xingqi in the process of killing their mother. The children ran back to their room, crying, and locked the door. Since the parent was already tied up, Su Xingqi left to pursue the children. Su Xingqi picked up a pair of pliers, opened the door, and used more wires to restrain the children. He tied their hands behind their backs, covered their mouths and noses with tape, and put plastic bags over their heads. The children, Hiu Ying and Hiu Man, also suffocated shortly after. After killing the whole family, Su Xingqi was at a loss of what to do next. He turned to his home to think it over. He thought that hiding them in a ditch or body of water would be too easy to find, and that dismembering them would be too exhausting and time-consuming. So he settled on burying them on their own property. On July 6, he returned to the home to try and clean up as many blood stains as he could find. He then got to work on digging the hole. He dug a hole deep and wide enough to hold the family of 4 and quickly placed their bodies inside of it. He also disposed of the murder weapons in the pit before filling it back in. The police believed Su Xingqi's story, despite being skeptical about his motive, and took him to the location where he claimed the crime had taken place. He pointed out the spot where the sharp knife, water pipe, iron pliers, and other tools used in the crime were hidden. On July 7, the police called in the fire department to assist in unearthing the remains. The firefighters arrived with excavation tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. However, they quickly encountered a problem when they hit a layer of cement while digging. It turned out that Su Xingqi had failed to mention in his confession that he had filled the pit with cement before covering it up. The firefighters were unable to break through the cement with their tools, and the police had to call in a private engineering company for assistance. The engineers arrived with high-grade tools and began drilling through the concrete slab. However, when they reached a point where they saw human hair, they became uneasy and refused to continue digging, not wanting to encounter a dead body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to resume the excavation. After excavating the pit, authorities found it to be 2.5 meters wide and 6 feet deep. The bodies of the 4 family members were discovered at the bottom, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. Xing Fai's body was at the very bottom. His hands and feet were bound with electric wire, and he had multiple stab wounds to his abdomen, back, and neck, with his clothes stained red with blood. The other family members were similarly bound with electric wire. Yanyi's mouth and nose were covered with tape, her hands and feet were bound, and her face was distorted. 2 family members, Hiu Man and Hiu Ing, showed no obvious signs of trauma, leading police to suspect they may have been buried alive. Su Xingqi was formally arrested and interrogated. During the interrogation, he altered his confession. He admitted that he lied about the affair. Shan Hui kicked Su Xingqi out of the house and banned him from returning. Despite this, Su Xingqi came back to apologize and was surprisingly forgiven by Xing Fai. Su Xingqi returned to the house on July 3 to start working, and it seemed that his relationship with Xing Fai had been repaired. However, on July 4, Su Xingqi attempted to molest a family member. Su Xingqi fled the house in a rage, not wanting to alert the neighbors. The next day, Su Xingqi tried to force his way into the house again, claiming he wanted to apologize. However, Xing Fai had anticipated this and returned home early. They got into an argument, which escalated into Su Xingqi stabbing Xing Fai. Su Xingqi's later confession matched his initial one, but with the additional detail of filling a makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were taken away for autopsy, it was discovered that Su Xingqi's account of the events was inaccurate. The autopsy revealed that Xing Fai's murder was more brutal than initially described. Xing Fai had sustained 9 stab wounds to the head and neck, nearly 80 stab wounds to the body, and 10 stab wounds to the hands and feet. Contrary to Su Xingqi's claim, Xing Fai was strangled, not suffocated with a plastic bag. Hiu Ying's cause of death was the only accurate part of Su Xingqi's account. Forensic analysis of the home found at the cutlery and dishes did not have the family's DNA on them, but they did have Su Xingqi's DNA. This suggested that Xing Fai was not killed in the kitchen, but rather elsewhere in the house. The investigation also revealed that the murder was premeditated, as the cement used to bury the bodies had been purchased by Su Xingqi prior to the murder. Furthermore, the weapon used was not a kitchen knife from the family, but rather one belonging to Su Xingqi. Additional investigations by the police found that the family's bank cards had been used at an ATM after the time of death, but no money could be withdrawn due to repeated failed PIN number guesses. The cash and bank cards belonging to the family were also missing. Su Xingqi's motive for the crime was robbery, and it was premeditated. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in his story, he would suddenly come up with a new explanation. According to Su Xingqi, his family's ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs, and his 2 children required 100,000 in cash to cover their school fees. He was not well liked in his local community, so he knew it would be difficult to borrow money from his neighbors. He turned to Xing Fai for help because his business trips to Hong Kong had not generated enough income. Su Xingqi suspected that Su Xingqi was wealthier than he seemed and that he is very stingy. The reason for his low salary during his time working for Xing Fai was that they were exploiting him for low-cost labor. On July 3, Su Xingqi traveled to Hong Kong without informing anyone and waited until July 5, when they had a day off from work. When Xing Fai returned home and found Su Xingqi there, he asked if he needed to cook something, and they men went to the kitchen together. Su Xingqi asked to borrow 1 million Hong Kong dollars, but Xing Fai rejected the request. He explained that he had to use the money for his mother's medical treatment and his daughter's education. However, Su Xingqi didn't believe him and accused Xing Fai of only using him for cost labor. Xing Fai became angry and ordered Su Xingqi to leave. As Xing Fai turned his back, with a concealed knife on, Xingqi attacked him from behind, covering his mouth and stabbing him. Su Xingqi then restrained in Hiu Ying and Hiu Man and began searching the house for cash and bank cards. He demanded to know the password for the bank cards, and Xing Fai intentionally gave him a fake password. Su Xingqi didn't realize this at the time. Su Xingqi claimed that he had killed others by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting a plastic bag over their head. However, when he went to the nearest ATM to withdraw cash, he discovered that the PIN number he had been given didn't work, and realized that Xing Fai had lied to him. Upon returning home, Su Xingqi discovered that everyone had suffocated to death in his absence. He found the food he and the others had been preparing and decided to eat it next to the 4 corpses while contemplating how to dispose of the bodies. After stealing $6,000 in Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai's body, Su Xingqi buried the corpses and tools in a small pit, then went to sleep at Xing Fai home. The next morning, Su Xingqi realized that the smell from the bodies might lead to their discovery, so he bought cement and returned to the home. He dug up the pit, poured in the cement, and refilled the hole. Su Xingqi then stayed at the home to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or house phone, telling callers that he was taking care of things while the Xing Fai family is on vacation. However, Su Xingqi did not expect his ruse to be uncovered so quickly. Even later, he continued to lie about many details, including when he bought the cement and the cause of Yan Yi's death. At this stage, the police didn't think they needed to continue obtaining an accurate confession. In their opinion, they had collected enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place at the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010. Su Xingqi initially pleaded not guilty and altered his previous statement. He claimed that his original story about the affair was true, and that Xing Fai was killed in self-defense, while Hiu Man and Hiu Ying were killed accidentally. The defendant stated that he had falsely confessed to extortion and murder brutality, which included physical abuse and suffocation. On November 23, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict for the murders of Xing Fai and Yan Yi. However, the defendant was acquitted of murdering Hiu Ying. Despite this, the defendant received a life sentence for the 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The presiding judge criticized the defendant, describing him as lacking a conscience and being unrepentant. The judge also accused the defendant of fabricating the self-defense story and affair to tarnish the victims' reputations. After Xing Fai's family death, who lived in Hong Kong, surprisingly defended him. They accused Xing Fai of being a hypocrite and the real villain. According to them, Xing Fai was exploiting Su Xingqi for cheap labor and taking his money. However, the neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village were outraged by these claims, forcing Su Xingqi's family to move back to China to avoid the backlash. The crime was considered one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. The community showed an outpouring of support for the family Xing Fai's, with many visiting their home to offer condolences. Netizens also raised more than enough money to cover the funeral expenses. Additionally, the family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family. Every year on July 5, the adoptive family would take the dogs for a walk in Ping Chi village, near the home of their former owners. On August 9, 2022, 55 years old Su Xingqi passed away in Hong Kong's Stanley Prison due to liver cancer. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Roberson. Bianca Roberson, born on October 17, 1998, Bianca grew up to be a remarkable individual. She excelled at Bayard Rustin High School, earning straight A's and graduating with honors. Her impressive academic record earned her a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University in Florida, where she planned to major in criminal justice and pursue her dream of becoming an FBI forensic agent. Bianca was a multi-talented young woman who had been involved in various activities throughout her life. She was a Girl Scout, a cheerleader, and a basketball player. She also had a passion for music, taking lessons in flute, violin, clarinet, and guitar. Additionally, she was an artist. Bianca lived with her mother and maternal grandmother, Josephine Perry, and was excited to experience the independence and challenges of dorm life. However, her plans were tragically cut short. On June 28, 2017, Bianca, her mother, and grandmother went shopping at Walmart to prepare for her upcoming move to Florida. Bianca Roberson was tragically killed in a car accident on a road she knew well. The incident occurred just 10 minutes after she left a Walmart parking lot. Witnesses quickly called 911, and first responders rushed to the scene. Unfortunately, paramedics were unable to save Bianca, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial observations suggested that Bianca's severe head injuries were caused by her car veering off the road. However, as police interviewed eyewitnesses, a crucial detail emerged. A witness reported that Bianca's car had collided with a red pickup truck, which had fled the scene without stopping. As she drove home to meet her granddaughter, Bianca's grandmother was worried about the traffic and wondered if it might be related to Bianca. However, she had no idea that the cause of the traffic jam was actually a car crash involving Bianca. When she arrived home, she was met with devastating news. 2 police officers were waiting to inform her that Bianca had been killed in the accident. For Michelle, Bianca's mother, the news was almost too much to bear. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. Michelle, a nurse from Delaware County, was still grieving the loss of her 22-year-old son, ML James Rowley, who had passed away from a heart condition in 2013. She had hoped that time would ease her pain, but instead, it had only intensified with the loss of her daughter. Michelle Robertson is struggling to cope with the loss of her second child. "I'm just existing," she said, feeling lost and without purpose. Her children were her reason for getting up in the morning, and now she feels like a mom without kids. After her divorce from Rodney Robertson in 2006, they managed to put aside their differences and work together as amicable co-parents thanks to their daughter Bianca. Michelle acknowledged that their divorce was not easy, but Bianca's presence helped to calm the tension. "Bianca didn't like it when I spoke harshly to her mother, and she would correct me," he said. Bianca's love for her family, especially her father, brought them closer together. Rodney admitted that Bianca was his favorite, and her devotion to family was inspiring. Bianca's father proudly said that his daughter was one step closer to achieving her dream of becoming an FBI forensic specialist. Bianca was excited to be on her own, but her future career was her main focus. Her hard work had paid off, as she had received a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University, one of the 3 schools that had accepted her out of the 4 she had applied to. Bianca's father said she had also been accepted to Coastal Carolina and the University of Georgia. Investigators were seeking CCTV footage to confirm the initial belief that Bianca's car veered off the road after colliding with a red pickup truck. If this were the case, it would imply that Bianca's death was no accident, but rather a deliberate act that required the police to identify a perpetrator. However, the truth revealed during the investigation proved even more stunning. While awaiting the CCTV footage, a significant development in the case occurred. It was initially assumed that Bianca's death resulted from her car crashing and hitting her head. Yet, during the autopsy, forensic experts made a startling discovery: there was a bullet in Bianca's head. This revelation drastically altered the course of the investigation. What initially seemed like an accident and later a collision with a red pickup truck was revealed to be a death caused by a gunshot wound to the head. The autopsy report's findings prompted detectives to meet with Bianca's family, bringing devastating news that her death was no accident. This revelation sent shockwaves, especially for her mother, Michelle, who couldn't fathom why anyone would harm her daughter. Bianca had a close-knit relationship with those around her, and her family couldn't identify anyone who might have wished her harm. Desperate for answers, the Robertson family relied on investigators to identify the person responsible for Bianca's tragic death. Upon reviewing the security footage from the Walmart her family visited on the day of her death, detectives found no suspicious activity. The detectives closely examined the family's actions from the moment they left their cars to the time they departed the parking lot. They dismissed the possibility that someone from Walmart could have followed Bianca and shot her, as she had not argued with anyone during their visit. The family had simply shopped, loaded their purchases into Bianca's car, and left. The investigation suggested that the motive for Bianca's death might be linked to an incident that occurred while she was driving home on the highway. Bianca's mother recalled, "We packed all the bags into Bianca's car," referring to the 2009 Chevy Malibu they had purchased for her 16th birthday from CarMax. Michelle recalled that her mother had chosen the car Bianca was driving when she first got her permit. According to Michelle, Bianca's mother said that Bianca had gotten everything she wanted, but Michelle didn't think of her as spoiled. Instead, she believed Bianca was simply loved and also willing to work for the things she desired. In fact, Bianca started her first job at McDonald's when she was 15 and soon switched to a dietary aid position at the Whitehorse Village Retirement Community in Delaware County. Michelle remembered that she had received a large number of letters and cards from the residents at Whitehorse Village who adored Bianca. After the police obtained traffic footage from CCTV cameras, Michelle pointed out that there were no cameras at the exact location where Bianca veered off the road. However, there was a camera about a mile away. To help illustrate the location, Michelle suggested looking at Google Maps. According to the map, Bianca lost control of her car where two lanes merged into one. When investigators reviewed the recording, they found evidence that supported the account of Bianca's encounter with the driver of the red pickup truck. The footage showed the cars traveling side by side, approaching a point where their lanes merged into one. It's possible that the conflict began when one driver failed to yield to the other. Given the tragic outcome, investigators inferred that the driver of the red pickup truck might have been the one who fired the shot. However, the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to read the pickup truck's license plates or see the driver's face. Nevertheless, from that point on, the driver of the pickup truck became the primary suspect in Bianca Roberson's death. Detectives were tasked with identifying the man, but they only had a blurry image to work with. After inquiring with Bianca's family members, it became clear that none of them knew anyone who owned a red pickup truck. The police then re-interviewed the witnesses who were present at the scene and those who had called 911, but unfortunately, none of them had caught a glimpse of the vehicle's license plate. The Bianca Roberson family has received an outpouring of support from friends, strangers, and people of all ages since Bianca's passing. A vigil was held just 2 days after her death, and many have reached out to share their stories and condolences. Bianca's family describes her as a selfless and compassionate person who always put the needs of others before her own. According to her mother, Michelle, Bianca would often take in children who were in need, even if it meant sneaking them into their home without permission. When confronted about her actions, Bianca would simply say that she wanted to help others in the same way she would want someone to help her if she were in a similar situation. This kind of empathy and kindness was evident in many aspects of Bianca's life, including the time she witnessed a car accident and immediately asked her mother if they could stop to help. A kind-hearted woman's first instinct was to invite those eating alone to join her family for dinner. In the aftermath of Bianca's car accident, investigators analyzed footage from distant cameras to determine the direction of the red pickup truck involved in the incident. To gather more details about the truck, including its brand, model, and license plate, they required higher quality footage. The police sought the public's assistance through the media, asking anyone with information about the truck to come forward. Following the accident, the pickup truck turned towards Poy Pike. To find evidence, detectives visited nearby houses and shops, searching for cameras that might have captured the truck. After an extensive search, they found a camera with good quality footage, taken around 5 minutes after witnesses called 911 to report Bianca's car accident. Upon analyzing this footage, detectives saw the red pickup truck driving by shortly after the incident. The investigation continued, but the license plate of the suspect's car remained unknown, and it was unclear if the car in the footage was the same one or just a similar vehicle. However, 2 days after the incident, a new lead emerged when a woman contacted the police, claiming to have seen the car they were searching for. She also reported seeing the driver's face. She described the car as a red pickup truck that overtook her, stopped at the Poy Pike intersection, and then turned left. This information was crucial in narrowing down the search area and also revealed that the pickup truck in the footage was not the actual suspect's vehicle, but rather a similar-looking truck. Her description helped a forensic artist create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white male, 25 to 35 years old, with brown hair and a stubble beard. The police released the suspect's sketch, hoping someone would recognize the person and come forward. They showed the sketch to Bianca's family, but no one recognized the individual. As the investigation continued, detectives began to consider the possibility that Bianca's death was a hate crime. To gather more evidence, the police canvassed the area where the red pickup truck was last seen, visiting homes and businesses near the intersection where it turned left. They were searching for a high-quality surveillance recording that could provide answers to their questions. Their efforts paid off when a homeowner, who lived less than half a mile from the intersection, provided the police with a recording from their driveway surveillance camera. By estimating the time it would take to drive from the crime scene to the homeowner's location, the police quickly found the relevant footage. Although the new footage was of better quality than the previous one, its angle made it impossible for the police to identify the car or its driver. The police worked hard to find another recording from a closer camera, and they got lucky. Although the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify some unique features of the car. These features included a sticker on the right side window, a vertical dent on the passenger door, and damage to the hood. With these details, the police had a much better chance of finding the car. The police sought the public's help in finding the truck and its driver by offering a $5,000 reward for any information that could aid in the investigation. They were confident that someone would recognize the distinctive vehicle. 3 days after Bianca Roberson's death, a lawyer contacted the police station on behalf of a client who wanted to turn himself in, stating that his client was connected to the incident that resulted in Bianca's death. The incident occurred on a recent Wednesday at approximately 5:30 p.m. Bianca Roberson, an 18-year-old who had just graduated from Westchester Ruston High School, was driving on Route 100, a 2-lane highway, on her way to Jacksonville University. Her life was full of promise, with a loving family and a bright future ahead. As she approached the merge with Route 202, the road narrowed from 2 lanes to 1. A common merge on a southeastern Pennsylvania highway turned deadly last Wednesday when a dispute over positioning escalated into violence. Bianca Roberson was merging from 2 lanes to 1 when a man in a red pickup truck, also merging, became agitated and shot her in the head. The suspect, 28-year-old David Desper of Pennsylvania, surrendered to police with his lawyer. Although he refused to testify, he consented to a search of his home and revealed the location of his pickup truck. David was subsequently arrested and charged with Bianca Roberson's murder. The police tracked down the suspect's vehicle, a pickup truck, at a location David had previously mentioned. Unique features on the truck, such as stickers on the windows and damage to the body, made it unmistakably clear that it was the same truck involved in the crime. The investigators searched Davider's residence and found the firearm that was used to shoot and kill Bianca Roberson. Despite this major breakthrough in the case, the authorities remained baffled as to the killer's motivation. Over 800 loved ones and members of the community attended a heart-wrenching farewell ceremony at the St. Paul's Baptist Church in the suburban Westchester borough, which lies approximately 25 miles. During the funeral service, many people paid tribute to she, including her brothers, officials from her high school, the chief admissions officer from the university she was set to attend, and friends. In his eulogy, Pastor Wayne Croft Sr. drew a comparison between the shooter and two other infamous cases: George Zimmerman, who shot and killed Trayvon Martin, a black teenager, in Florida in 2012, and was acquitted of murder in 2013, and Michael Dunn, who shot and killed Jordan Davis, another black teenager, in Florida in 2012, after a dispute over music. Dunn was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. The pastor expressed the sentiment of the black community, stating that regardless of whether Bianca's murder was a result of road rage or racism, the fact remains that a brilliant young black woman's life was lost. During the trial in September 2018, David Desper was asked to explain his motive for committing the crime. Instead of providing an answer, he requested forgiveness from Bianca's family. For Bianca's parents, the thought of facing their daughter's alleged killer was daunting. To show their support and unity, Rodney had arranged for family members and friends to wear T-shirts with Bianca's face on the front as they gathered at the Chester County Government Services Center. The family of Bianca Roberson wore bracelets with a poignant message: "Bianca Roberson, a rose in God's garden." They also held a banner that read, "Justice for Bianca Nicole Roberson," a reminder of the tragic event that took her life on June 28, 2017. Rodney, Bianca's father, expressed his uncertainty about how he would react when he saw the man responsible for his daughter's murder. "I don't know what I'll do when I see him," he said. "The man who held the gun that took my daughter's life, he just took her dreams away. He had no right to do that." Michelle, Bianca's mother, struggled to come to terms with the loss of her child. "I want to hold her, comfort her, and bring her back," she said through tears. The prosecutor argued that the traffic conflict occurred because Bianca failed to yield when their lanes merged into one. In response, David Desper rolled down the passenger side window and fired a shot. Realizing the severity of his actions, David Desper fled the scene, leaving his pickup truck with a friend in Pennsylvania, and attempted to escape to Delaware. However, after his sketch and the distinctive features of his pickup truck were publicized in the news, David Desper decided to hire a lawyer and surrender. The police investigated his social media accounts and interviewed his friends but found no evidence to suggest that the crime was motivated by bias. As a result, David Desper was not charged with a hate crime. District Attorney Hogan stated that there was no indication that the crime was racially motivated or a hate crime. However, many people disagreed with this assessment. Before the sentencing, the defense portrayed David Desper as harmless and immature for his age, describing him as a big kid who enjoyed playing with cars in his free time. They argued that David Desper had essentially handed the case to the government by turning himself in. The defense claimed that David Desper was driving home when another car startled him, causing him to fire the gun. They maintained that David Desper was not a menacing individual. Prosecutor Chris Miller countered that a 28-year-old man driving with a loaded firearm is not a big kid. He emphasized that David Desper's actions were those of a responsible adult. Ironically, David Desper's own mother had shared a Facebook post about the police searching for the person who murdered Bianca Roberson, unaware that the suspect was her own son. Wendy Desper expressed her love for Bianca's family and apologized for her son's actions. "I'm so sorry for what my son did," she said, as her son wept. Rodney Robertson struggled to speak through tears as he addressed his daughter's killer. "I have simple questions for the defendant," he said. "Why did you shoot my daughter? Was it because of her youth, her race, her gender, or just because you wanted to go first on the road? Was it simply because you were having a bad day?" Rodney continued, "All my dreams for Bianca were coming true until the day the defendant took her life. Now, all I have left of Bianca are my memories." David Desper pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. The court sentenced him to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft became emotional as she announced the sentence, telling Desper, "I don't believe you were afraid, I believe it was anger." County Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft imposed the maximum sentence of 20 to 40 years for that grade of homicide. David Desper attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeal was denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Krista Baker Alexander. Krista Ann Baker was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winfred Baker and Patty Ann Baker. She was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers. When Krista was 8 years old, her family moved to Abota Springs, Louisiana, where they built a church and actively participated in its activities. Growing up, Krista traveled extensively with Christian missionary organizations to help those in need, particularly children. She was homeschooled and later pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at the North Tennessee Bible Institute. Krista's passion was serving others, especially children, and she hoped to start her own family one day. However, her faith took priority, and she dreamed of finding a husband who shared her values. Krista adhered to traditional values and chose to save herself for marriage, only dating with the intention of finding a lifelong partner. During this time, she developed close friendships, including one with Cootie Alexander, a fellow youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Cootie was a charismatic and well-liked individual in his community. Their families met through the church and maintained a good relationship. Cootie had been friends with Krista for many years before he asked her father, Winfred Baker, for permission to marry her. Her father happily agreed. During their courtship, Cootie and Krista followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Krista had even told her parents that she wanted to save her first kiss with Cootie for their wedding day. While Krista helped her parents at church, Cootie was pursuing a career as a paramedic. A year later, they decided to get married. On March 1, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their families and church members. The wedding was a joyful celebration, and Krista was a beautiful bride. However, their happiness was short-lived. Just 4 months after the wedding, tragedy struck. On June 29, 2008, Cootie returned home from a night shift at around 6 a.m. to find Krista lying face down on the floor. She was dead. Cootie immediately called the police. Krista's body was found near the front door, with no signs of a struggle. A bullet wound was discovered in the back of her head, with burn marks on her skin, indicating that the shot was fired at close range. The gunshot wound suggested that the gun was positioned at the back of Krista's head when the shot was fired. A 9mm shell casing was found on the floor next to her body. Initially, investigators thought the crime might have been a botched robbery. It was possible that someone broke into the house, assuming it was empty, and then killed Krista to avoid leaving a witness. Police had thoroughly searched the house. A jewelry box was found on the bed, the gun cabinet had been forced open, and Krista's purse was on the kitchen table, showing signs of having been rummaged through. Additionally, many drawers and cabinets were left open, suggesting that the perpetrator was looking for something of value. After completing their search of the house, police began interviewing individuals who had access to the property. Krista's husband, Cootie Alexander, was the first person they spoke with. However, he was too distraught to answer questions immediately, and investigators had to wait for him to compose himself. Once he was able to speak, Cootie reported that everything had seemed normal the previous night before he left for his overnight shift as an emergency medical technician with Kidane Ambulance. He told that he called Krista multiple times throughout the night, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her several text messages, which she didn't respond to. Assuming she was just tired and had fallen asleep, he didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home the next morning, he was met with a disturbing scene. The front door was slightly open, and upon entering, he found their belongings scattered everywhere and Krista lying on the floor with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He immediately checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Panicked, he called 911 right away. The investigators were tasked with determining who could have entered the house while he was at work. It was possible that the perpetrator waited until Krista was alone before striking. They also explored the possibility that Krista may have let the killer into the house herself, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body or in the house. This suggested that she may have known her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. Cootie informed the investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. What made the situation even more tragic was that Krista was 17 weeks pregnant, meaning that not only had he lost his wife, but also their unborn child. Cootie was overcome with grief and struggled to come to terms with the loss, unsure of how to move forward with his life. The case involved 2 victims, not one. The crime scene appeared unusual to investigators. The house was messy, but it didn't seem like the result of a typical burglary. Cabinets and drawers were open, but there was no evidence of rummaging or searching for specific items. It was as if the perpetrator wanted to mislead the police. The jewelry box was also open, but the jewelry was still intact, which raised suspicions. Krista's purse was open, yet all its valuable contents remained. The police noted that 2 firearms were missing from the house, but this was unusual because there were more firearms in the house that were not taken. This led investigators to wonder why the perpetrator didn't take all the available firearms. Based on these observations, investigators concluded that the crime scene was staged. It appeared that the perpetrator intended to kill Krista Alexander and then make it look like a robbery. As a result, the police began interviewing their neighbors to gather more information. This led to an unexpected lead in the case. Mavis Rabel, the 69-year-old neighbor and was landlord of the Alexanders, described they as quiet and recently married. They were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Mavis remembered Krista Alexander as a kind and helpful woman who rarely went outside without her husband. Mavis last saw they on Saturday afternoon when Cootie Alexander was collecting the bodies of turtles he had shot in his backyard pond. This led investigators to discover that Cootie owned the gun. However, when police searched the Alexanders' home, they did not find a gun. Cootie claimed that only a rifle and a shotgun had been stolen from the house, but he never mentioned a handgun. Detectives suspected that Cootie might be hiding something. They searched the pond area and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings were similar to the one found near Krista's body. The police sent the casings to the state crime lab for analysis. The lab report confirmed that the gun Cootie used to shoot the turtles was the same gun used to shoot Krista. Investigators summoned Cootie to the police station for further questioning regarding his wife's death. He maintained that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Cootie explained that he had left for work at 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned home the next morning at 6 a.m., providing an alibi that he was working throughout the night. Upon verification, Cootie's colleagues corroborated his claim, stating that he was indeed present at work all night. When inquired about the firearm, Cootie revealed that he owned a gun but claimed to have sold it the day prior to the incident to an unknown man named Steve. The alleged buyer had paid $500 in cash, which made verifying this claim difficult. According to Cootie, Steve was described as a white male in his mid-30s, around 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old Toyota pickup truck. Krista's parents shared their concerns with investigators, stating that they didn't believe Cootie's account of events. Her father, Winfred Baker, noted that Cootie showed little emotional response to Krista's death, a behavior that had started a few months before their wedding. They had been experiencing financial difficulties since moving in together, and the impending arrival of their child was likely to add to their struggles. Krista's parents also suspected that Cootie was having an affair with a colleague who had even attended their wedding. Krista had confided in friends just weeks before her death that she suspected Cootie was cheating on her. As investigators dug deeper into the marriage, they became increasingly convinced that Cootie and Krista had different visions for their future. However, was this enough motive for Cootie to take Krista's life, especially given that she was carrying their unborn child? The police had one lead, a man named Steve, who Cootie claimed had bought the gun used to kill Krista. Investigators set out to find Steve, using the description provided by Cootie. Meanwhile, they brought Cootie in for further questioning, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before, during, and after work on the day of Krista's death. This time, his story differed from his initial statement. The investigators found several inconsistencies in Cootie's story. He failed to mention a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house, and to whom he had sold a gun. Additionally, while on duty, Cootie showed no concern for his pregnant wife Krista's well-being when she didn't answer his calls, despite knowing she was home alone. He could have asked a family member to check on her, but didn't. Furthermore, the crime scene appeared to have been staged, which raised suspicions about Cootie's involvement. As the investigators applied pressure, Cootie's story began to unravel. After several hours of interrogation, he changed his story entirely. He claimed that he had been sleeping on the couch before his night shift and that his wife had woken him up late. He stated that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cootie then explained that he had been walking around the house with a gun, intending to take it to work because a colleague was interested in buying it. He said he was fooling around, aiming the gun at objects and making click, click noises. He approached Krista from behind, put the gun to the back of her head, and claimed that an accidental shot occurred. He maintained that it was an accident and that he didn't intend to harm her. When he realized Krista was dead, he was scared and didn't know what to do. Cootie Alexander admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. He took several items from his house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work with the front door left open. His plan was for someone to discover the open door and lights on, and then find his wife, Krista, while he was at work. However, this plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander threw a pistol and other items, including his wife's jewelry, out of the car window. By the time he arrived at work, the only items left in the car were a DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a colleague, Allison Sharp, with whom he had been having an affair. Alexander and Sharp kissed and held hands before and after his wedding, spending one night at a Baton Rouge hotel. While his wife Krista was at church camp, he took Sharp to a hotel for a jacuzzi evening with fine china plates, meal and wine, amidst supposed financial difficulties with his low salary of $11 per hour and stalled professional certification efforts. County and his pregnant wife, Krista, were struggling financially and unemployed, and on top of that, their washing machine had broken. But Alexander managed to come up with money for a romantic evening at Callaway Inn with his mistress, Sharp. Police later determined that a shocking act unfolded in the home, contradicting Cootie's initial claim that Krista's death was accidental. Detectives found it difficult to prove direct involvement, but believed Cootie's explanation was suspicious. Despite the challenges, police were convinced that Krista's death was not an accident, and Cootie's actions raised more questions than answers. After the police arrested Cootie Alexander, Krista's parents were able to find the strength to forgive him. The Baker family came together to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter and what would have been their fourth grandchild. Krista's father, Winford Baker, remembered her fondly, saying, "She was a sweet and lovely person." Krista had made a significant impact on those around her, having completed 17 mission trips during her lifetime. Winford Baker recalled a conversation he had with Cootie shortly before his arrest. Although it was brief, Baker described the encounter as emotional, saying, "We hugged and cried together." Despite his desire for justice, Baker stated that he had already forgiven Cootie. "We forgave him even before we knew who was responsible," he said. Baker found comfort in knowing that Krista was now in a better place, saying, "She's with the Lord, in heaven, and at peace." The trial started on August 2, 2009. Prosecutors claimed that Cootie's behavior after Krista's death implied that he had acted on purpose. They wondered why he didn't call 911 right away if the shooting was truly an accident. Instead, Cootie faked a robbery and left Krista's body for 12 hours before going home and calling 911. Prosecutors also questioned Cootie's story that the shooting was accidental, noting that he was an experienced gun owner who had received proper training from his father. Cootie Alexander, 24, was charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife, Krista. Cootie had admitted to being involved in her death, which he claimed was a result of his poor decision-making. After initially going to trial, Cootie suddenly changed his plea to guilty, ending jury deliberations. This unexpected turn of events came about when Krista's family agreed to a plea deal that had been proposed earlier. Alexander was sentenced to 55 years in prison in August 2009.